Yo, 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 ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stream. How's everybody doing? Hello, Iron Torch, and hello, Bailithal. So what have I got for you boys today? Listen, not gonna make any bold predictions or incredibly loud, proud statements, but for my money, this will really be the first proper mod stream that we've had in a little bit. The last couple were me getting back into the spirit of things, the habit of things, jumping in and getting some work done on HYDRA. Today, we're going to take that to a bit of another level. We're going to do some conceptual stuff. Don't worry, we'll probably have an obligatory couple minutes where we talk about some names. Obviously, I've been making those polls lately where I can't really decide between two names, and I want the community's input on that. So if you missed that, you can check out the polls on the channel community tab. But the main pièce de résistance today will actually be related to the campaign that's coming up. I'm not sure how many people noticed, but there's been a bit of a meme going on with the campaign. And that meme, of course, is that people are voting for pretty much whatever they want and recasting their vote pretty consistently. So as you can see right now, Terran are in the lead. This is the first time they've ever been in the lead. Just like Zerg were in the lead for the first time a little while ago. And most of the votes are gone from Protoss. Now keep in mind, it's not like we've seen 100 more votes or something. It's only gone up by 4 total votes since I last checked yesterday. And yesterday, live on stream, we saw the votes just keep getting shuffled around, and Zerg took the lead very briefly. Probably because I looked at the poll on stream. So now that I've looked at the poll on stream again, we might see this shift once again. Basically, people are just like taking their vote away from something and recasting it to some other thing. We have seen a net increase in votes. I think it was only at like 20 or 30 or something at the time of me initially looking at it yesterday. And since then, it's certainly gotten pretty far up there. So maybe we'll see that move around. I was kind of interested in the fact that Zerg was winning. I thought it was just more people were voting. And then I obviously just got turned into a bit of a meme. That being said, we're still going to try to get some planning down as far as laying the groundwork for the kinds of missions we can be expecting. We can work on the setting. And I want the setting to be like rich enough and varied enough that we should have plenty of different tile sets on display, but it should probably take place in the same maybe star system or solar system, something like that. We will probably also touch on like the characters at play. We want representation from all 3 races, so we definitely want to have a bunch of different factions here. And to that end, it doesn't really matter who you end up playing as necessarily. Ideally, by the end of our planning, maybe not in this stream specifically, but in general, I hope that we'll have something that is exciting for people to play as and something that motivates people to dive deeper. Something that I personally am excited about developing a campaign for all 3 of these perspectives, or just pick any race that happens to be involved here. So I always planned on having, for example, even if it was a Protoss campaign, sometimes you'd be allied with Terrans and Zerg. That was my thought, is like I'd find a way to make that make sense. And that's why I was floating the Demiurge idea, the idea that the Demiurge is a character. There's a character that is a Demiurge, and they've controlled you, and they control a Zerg brood somehow, and they control a Zerg, like a Terran, mercenary force or something. Whatever the case may be. That was one way to allow for that based on the premise of the campaign. So we're going to work on the premise. We're going to work on the factions, the world building, so to speak. We're going to start diving into, what kinds of factions you might see. And I'll probably just talk a bunch of shit about a bunch of ideas here, and we'll continue to elaborate on those as time goes on. So this will still be a conceptual heavy stream. I'm not saying we're going to get work done on maps or anything necessarily. We might get some graphics work done. We might, basically look at some of the remaining to-do stuff here. But by the end of the stream, I hope to have a decent amount of work done on some of the things that will make it into the final product of whatever the campaign ends up being. And by adopting this sort of workflow where I'm not too worried about, like, oh, if it ends up being a Protoss campaign, I can't use this concept. I'm going to be able to use pretty much everything that we end up deeming fit, of course. So Yeah, ideas here. There you go. And hello, Veek. Since I started talking before I could say hello to you, but after I said hello to everybody else. How are you doing? Oh yeah, and I guess I should take a very quick look at the... I should just have a community button here, right? We'll say... And then we'll say... Community tab. Yeah, I just wanted to take a look at this poll. So it looks like Solarian has definitely won out over here, which was my take as well. I was going to bed, and there was something where somebody used the prefix solar in something else, in a podcast or a science video or something I was listening to, and I was like, oh, Solarian. And I think that's even like the name of a god or something in some fantasy setting. I think maybe Warlord's Battlecry has like a... Solarian is a god for, or a titan, like a super unit for the human faction in that game or something. And so it wasn't like I've heard those two, or that particular word used before as like a name, specifically in an RTS capacity, funnily enough, but I didn't make the connection for that. And I thought like, oh, you're kind of leading the stars, like leading. I think it literally does mean like leader of suns or something, if you literally translate it, right? But you can think that to mean like, you know, a flagship that is by definition like, you know, a spacecraft, right? Very large and in charge in that respect. You can imagine that a flagship could be called a Solarian because, you know, if it means leader of stars, like, well, it's a starship and it's like where you'd put some commanders or whatever in theory. So, what's up, Alexander? What's your tired emoji? Sol Invictus is an actual deity? What, from like history or whatever? Yeah, I think Lunarian was the Titan for the Wood Elves or something, and then Solarian was the Titan for the High... Oh no, maybe Lunarian was High Elves. I don't remember what Wood Elves were. And then the Titan for Dark Elves was Kargoth. It was actually a pretty epic name, but can't use that for Protoss, obviously. I think the only references to... Well, it's not even Soul, but it's a reference to sun, and it's like that praise the sun meme from Dark Souls. That's the only thing that immediately comes to mind as far as like using soul, S-O... Well, no, it doesn't even use S-O-L, but using the sun as like a theme for a faction or whatever. Yeah, I guess I could spell it with a C instead of a K if I wanted it to be quote-unquote original. But I think I have something that's similar to Kargoth in one of my Zerg campaigns, but I don't remember. Yeah, well, that's what it is in Warlord's Battlecry, right? Kargoth, Warlord's Battlecry. Yeah, here we go. He's a giant Spider-Man. That's a pretty meme gif. I don't know why they decided to pick that one. Apparently he's really weak, but also very fast. I weave a web of doom! Doom! Car apostrophe Gath, yeah. That floating apostrophe stuff, I feel like it's just a gimmick, right? I've refreshed the page and now 2 votes are missing. I think YouTube takes a while to tally the votes correctly or whatever. 2 votes are now missing and Zerg is slightly in the lead. So it's just more memes. Name a unit Doombringer. That's almost like Darkness Bringers. At least it wouldn't be a mission name. Actually, I don't know what would be worse, to be honest, but... But yeah, Alexander, if you have like a list of references to Soul that you want to hit me with that make it to make me reconsider using that as the name, I would be open to being convinced. But I actually haven't seen people use Soul in RTS context or even in video games. Realistically, there's the obvious Starcraft connection is Solarite, but that's like, that's like ammonite or voidonite or something. It's like it's just a material or whatever. I think that's the it took me a while to think about that. I guess that is the more obvious connection, but yeah. So when I've used the apostrophe stuff, I haven't really thought about it too much, but I've usually used it historically. I don't use it anymore just because I feel like it's cliche and it doesn't really add anything besides the visceral feel that something is a little bit more extravagant. But besides that, it doesn't really add much, right? It usually just serves to kind of confuse. But I kind of use it to indicate emphasis. So usually I have like the apostrophe. So it's like 2 syllables in, there will be an apostrophe, and then the last syllable, if it's a 3-syllable word. Like for a while, the Protoss province Harundal was Harun apostrophe Dal. So you knew to pronounce it Harundal because Harun would almost be like one word. And it's sort of like a more elegant way of hyphenating something, I guess. But you don't need an apostrophe for that. You can just have voice acting that says Harundal the way that you're supposed to say it. And then people know it's not Harundal or some, whatever the fuck. Like, it's a really stupid reason to do it at the end of the day. I guess at least you can point to a reason in my logic if you ask me about it. But, like, if all my projects are having voice acting, so it doesn't really matter. There are factions in League called Lunari and Solari. I've never even heard of them, and I used to play that game literally daily for years, so that must be a recent addition. When did they add Solari? Was it 2 eyes? Oh no, it's just 1 eye. Oh, I guess Leona is a Solari. I never knew this. When did they add this shit? I guess Pantheon was a member of the Solari. I don't know who Aphelios is, but he's of the Lunari. So I guess there's really just only one active member in the current league or something. When is there like a thing that says when they added it? Because oh shit, Atreus, dude, they stole my name. Oh, never mind. That's his. Atreus is just Pantheon's name, I guess. Well, Atreus is like the name of some Greek god, I think, as well. So that is a yeah. It's sort of like when I was talking about how it doesn't make sense to ignore anything that was used by Blizzard because it's not like they ever pull from like an organic source of or a connected source of resources, right? They just like grab anything that seems popular or sufficiently like ancient or something. Yeah. Anyway, let's start talking shit about some stuff, shall we? So I kind of want to do some concept work on some races as well before I jump into the campaign, but I'm not really sure. I'm not really oversold on like one thing or another. We definitely have some work to do with the Zerg. So I wanted to just like take stock of the Zerg compared to the other races. So I know the Terrans need another Iron Foundry unit for sure. I guess if we take a look at the overall number of units per branch, we might find some instability here. So there's 3 plus 2 is 5 plus 4 is 9. So there's 9 factory units or mech units. For bio, we have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I think, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So we got 10 barracks or bio. And then we have 4, but I'm not sure if you count the Trojan because it's a transport, right? It's a non-combatant. We'll say 4, 5, 3. So that's, what, 11, 12? Yeah. So that's 12, although one of them is a little bit contentious because it's more about like utility or whatever. Hmm. I actually don't see much Norse mythology, or if I do, it escapes me. It goes over my head because I'm not familiar with it. I'm pretty sure it would be obvious, though. I don't think lunar and solar are Norse concepts. I'm pretty sure lunar means like, if I just type solar. Oh. Well, it comes from solus or solaris or something like that. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure it's all Latin. But yeah, see, most people only penetrate like one layer of any given mythos, which is why I was talking about how like Ifrit is really common in the circles I swim in. Like I think that was a StarCraft 2 unit at some point, or it was like an upgrade maybe. I feel like Ifrit was a StarCraft 2 unit. I don't remember fully. I know Blizzard used Ifrit as like a unit name at some point. Maybe it was for like one of their Diablo games as opposed to StarCraft. I don't think Ifrit was ever added to Melee for StarCraft 2, but I vaguely recall maybe I was playing a custom campaign and it was Ifrit. In that case, I might be getting my wires crossed because obviously that's a modder and not a first party content. But yeah, what's up, Milestone? Oh, it's not related to that combo. Okay. Yeah, I think generally speaking, you just don't see that many. I think like one area that's pretty underexplored is like the biblical side of things. I've tried to go really deep into biblical mythology, not for the sake of Protoss necessarily, I should say. They kind of have that like they have the ecclesiarchal stuff where it's like the Christian church and like the organization of the clergy and whatnot. They have like the Templar, obviously, like the Zealot, kind of plays with that theme. Archon, right? That sort of stuff. But in the case of like the or the Terran side of things, I've tried to get biblical with some of like the passives. Like the Firebat is a polyoid adhesive. A polyoid is I think I'm not sure if it's actually a word. A polyoid, I think is how you would pronounce it. What the fuck? Wait, why is a Reddit thing linked here? It's not even. It's not even here. That's some nice Google right there, although it's not Google. I'm glad this comes up though. But yeah, so a polyoid is from a polyon, which if we search is I'm not even sure why. Oh, yeah, Baden. Apollyon redirects here. So basically, it's another name for the devil, I guess. I thought it was actually a place. I thought it was referring to hell itself, but I suppose that also works. I was just looking for something that was like conjuring up a sense, if you end up knowing what it is, of some sort of fire. Yeah. Well, I think even if we went to Google Doc, oh wait, if we go to Google.com and we search Apolyoid, it links to the Reddit thread, which is obviously the prank here from Razorback. This is when Razorback just copied a bunch of my shit. Oh, actually, I think he has some other stuff. Yeah, he has a polyoid adhesive. It makes hellbats do damage for structures. Prank. Yeah, interesting names in the Old Testament. Yeah, I feel like stuff like that, like tetragram, is kind of from there. So that would be really cool to work in somewhere. Which is, it literally just means like it's like an artifact that represents God, which is like that plays with some really high level concepts that are kind of like epic and mythological in proportion. It would be kind of cool to mess around with that stuff. Most people just mocked it, which is fair because he's talking about like a completely different game, and he's also working in. I don't remember the context of all of the stuff that he did. Some of them were a little bit more egregious, but he literally found posts or made posts on all three individual like race focused websites, or race focused subreddits. So it would be like all things Zerg, all things Terran, and all things Protoss. And he made a post in each one of them. Pretty hilarious. Hey, yeah, Ark is from the Bible, right? Oh, I didn't know that about it being considered offensive to reference them, Baalathal. I wouldn't mind doing stuff. I wouldn't mind like tapping into that. I think the reason why I tend to stay away is that they just sound really jank in English. Like they probably sound way better in their language or whatever. But for my money, it's like they are just kind of junk, right? For a Westerner. I forget where I was coming at that angle from. Oh yeah, no, we were just talking about like certain mythologies and stuff. Yeah. So like for the Nordic side of things, like most people will talk about like Thor and Loki and Odin and Mjolnir and Ragnarok and all that shit. But they don't really go much deeper than that. Like there's all sorts of weird stuff like frost giants and elves and shit. And like they have the Midgard and High Guard or whatever it is. What's the high one? I don't remember. They have like one that's for like high end, one for low and stuff like that, right? Oh yeah, Eiffelheim or Ilfheim, whatever it is. Yeah, the Asgard is what I was thinking of for the actual gods. What's up, DF? Thing. Yeah, so there's tons of different things that are out there as far as like mythologies to go deep in. And luckily enough, like nobody's bothered to explore them really. So they usually just take like the most common shit and then go for it. Now, the one counterpoint to that is maybe you always want to take the common stuff, insofar as, yes, you risk being a cliche, but the concept is immediately understood because it's a pop culture thing where most people will know what you're talking about. That is one point in their favor. I just think it's worse to be creatively bankrupt in a world so simultaneously deprived of ideas and yet full of them, if that makes any sense. Like they're never actualized upon. But I think it's worse to be creatively bankrupt in that kind of setting than it is to be like slightly too arcane for the average person. So that's just my take for the most part. Yeah, hell with one L is like a location and a god or something. It's really weird. I thought the Nephilim were like the counterpart to the Seraphim or something. It's probably Nephilim, Seraphim. I don't know. But yeah, they just sort of like changed up the pronunciation. Maybe that's the play, to be honest. Maybe the play is to like kind of be cheeky with the spelling or like the end of the word. Like I went for the name of a place in mythology and just changed it to from a polygon to a polygoid, and that's how I got the adhesive for the fire bat and stuff. Maybe that could work, but I still prefer stuff like that for ability names or passives or something like that than I do for actual units, right? That is true, Milestone. That is true. That's where I would like. I have thought of like a bunch of really epic, just like complete, like purely fictitious names in the past. And because they only have meaning to me, I don't know if they would ever really be good, even though they might sound epic. Because that's another thing, like centarian instead of centenarian, for example, is like you're condensing the word centenarian into something that could realistically sound pretty epic. Like maybe that is the play, to be honest. Maybe Dragoon should just be called Centarian, even though the only connection you have there is if you know what a centenarian is and you estimate that that's what I'm trying to tap into, then okay, yeah, you're talking about a guy who's kind of old, who's lasted a long time, who's veteran status, perhaps. But you're not really talking about anything related to the combat role of the unit. Like, I don't know. Maybe the unit can kind of speak for itself in that sense. I do think that, by the way, the Dragoon has some of the weakest voice acting in the entire game. I should mention that. Like, imagine if the Dragoon had Phoenix's voice acting in the Dragoon, where he's like, stalwart and resolute and sounds like very confident. But the Dragoon is just like, I have returned. Awaiting. Make use of me. The Dragoon is literally an ASM artist. An ASMR artist, if you know what I mean. So yeah, anyway. Let's take a look at the Protoss. The Protoss, I keep feeling like they have too few units in a lot. I feel like they have potential for even more units, but I think it's because for a while Terran had tier 4 tech. Technically, Zerg have tier 4 tech, but just for the Alcagelisk, so it's nothing. That should probably be changed for now, actually, just for balance sake. But yeah, they technically had that. But Protoss definitely have plenty of units, right? Yeah, I agree, Veek. To suck my own dick here, I do really like the Hierophant voice acting. He sounds pretty badass. I remember the older one was like I was trying to be like a weary warrior almost, and like like a Templar, right? Like sort of what they sound like. But that just doesn't fly. It's not nearly as nice to listen to. TBH. The probe one is the advanced worker. So there's an advanced worker for all races, right? So the Mason used to be SCV. This one's Talos, used to be Mason, ironically enough. This one I haven't figured out a new name for. The probe will eventually be called an artisan. So I'm going to move this name down. And then there's going to be some sort of like more masterwork craftsman name, something that implies a better worker or a master at their craft. Or maybe it could be like apprentice and artisan, but it feels weird to call like a robotic unit apprentice, I guess. Maybe not any weirder than envoy or witness at the same time. So I'll consider that. Either way, the advanced worker provides power to nearby structures, identical to the pylon power field. Ideally, it would be slightly smaller, but I don't know. And then they have this passive where if you have an artisan nearby powering a structure, they warp in faster. And they're also flying units. So you're essentially, the idea is that you have these advanced workers that can deploy on, they can fly so they can harvest resources that are maybe a little bit less convenient for other workers to harvest much faster. They obviously have the benefit of maybe moving a little bit faster as well. All that stuff. And you can use them to set up like proxy bases in theory. And like you can obviously warp in the pylon and not wait for the pylon to finish warping in as you warp in the rest, and then you can move the artisan somewhere else. Ah, yes, that's the Legionnaire. Hephaestus. Yeah, Hephaestus is another one, or Hephaestus. How are you supposed to say it? Hephaestus, maybe? I'm not going to get pronunciation here. I always almost accidentally pronounce or type pronunciation as pronunciation. Hephaestus. Hephaestus. So I guess Hephaestus is not as cliche as Vulcan. Vulcan is definitely used much more. Maybe Hephaestus is used less just because it's like more syllables and a little bit less punchy. But I definitely feel like it's used pretty frequently. That being said, I can't really exactly point to anything that has used it, so maybe it's like Hephaestus. I think I've seen like Hephaestus cannon or Hephaestus reactor or something. I don't know. Yeah, there you go. Anyway, Zerg have the advanced worker, the Gozveleth, which is pretty epic. Wow, what a fucking name for a passive. Plethaural gestation. What does plethaural mean again? Let me see if I can remember this. Oh, an abundance or excess of something. Yeah, plethora, of course. That makes sense. Gosvaleths spend half of their maximum health to gestate a building, only becoming consumed if they are below half health. So basically, they can, in theory, put down multiple structures. Apparently they can't. Oh yeah, they have Defiler Mound in their links. Oh, that shouldn't even be in there anyway. Matral Nest. I guess I'm missing Quasal Quay. It should just be the same thing as the drone, so if there's any difference here. Oh, besides egg, obviously. Oh. Awkward. Quasal Quay was also missing here. Yeah, name stream. There you go. No, don't worry. I was talking about this earlier where I have like a more widespread plan for what this stream is going to include. I'm not even really looking for the names right now. That was just sort of an interesting debate in the chat or a conversation in the chat. Really what I was looking for was, oh, I guess Goswillith probably is not linked by the Quasal Quay. What we're going to be doing in this stream is more so related to the campaign. I wonder if anything has Gosvaleth in it. Yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah, the idea is that the Protoss hold these like robotic workhorses in not necessarily reverence but esteem, like they respect them. And the idea is that those would have stark contrasts to the more aggressive or perhaps negative, foreboding sounds of some of the higher tier robotic tech. So I'm deliberately actually trying to make something that's a little bit distinct there. Trying to pull on those distinctions where possible. Yeah, the fix for that UED commander is increasing their aggro range slightly. However, it resulted in them running off when idle a lot more. Too much of a result for my liking. Like, I decided to go away from that. Oh wait, Mutal Spire is in here somewhere. What's up, Burak Dermis? This is I'm not really playing anything right now. I'm modding Brood War, the original Starcraft. You can type !HYDRA in the chat for more info. Or to go to fraudsclub.com. All right, so we have add links for Gauze for left. So yeah, I do think it's surprisingly easier for me to grab names for Zerg than it is for Protoss, because the Protoss units, I have like these different expectations for them where I don't feel comfortable just making up my own shit, whereas Zerg I definitely do. It's like, hell yeah, dude. Get everything done. I'm not sure why they would be appearing slower than on stream. That doesn't really make any sense. You're welcome, Burak. Hello, just another George. No, none of these are normal. So Ultra Core is just a renamed Ultralisk. My thought process is we basically have these different suffixes. So, for example, Hydralisk, I took Lisk as the suffix for a medium range unit, something that doesn't have an absurdly high range but isn't melee. So it's any range in between whatever absurdly high sounds like, right? Whereas a Guardian would definitely be longer range. So for the Guardian, I've renamed it to Gizithalor. We keep the G beginning, and we have Thalor as the suffix. So then when you go to the Ultralisk morph Cascathalor, you still have the Thalor at the end that tells you that, oh, there's a connection between these two units. Sort of like how there's Zergling and Broodling. I wanted to kind of take that along. So Mutalisk stays because it's a ranged unit, just like Hydralisk. And then we take that and we add some other things, like the Devourer became Vithralisk because Devourer is a boring name, and I wanted something a little bit more interesting. But it's a ranged unit, so we go for Vithralisk. If the Vithralisk ends up getting rebalanced and I give it higher range, it would change to maybe Vithalor or something like that, Vithrothalor, something, a little bit more involved, but has the Thalor at the end, just like the other high range units. My melee units that are not basic units like Zerglings have Rokor as the suffix. So we have Nathracor, which is the swarming melee unit. We have Ultracor, which is the Ultralisk. We have Akistracor, which isn't implemented yet, but it's a melee queen morph. And the queen itself was renamed to Matroleth or Matroleth, because that's sort of matriarch, Matroleth. And then Leth is the suffix for any specialty unit. So like a specialist like the Defiler gets renamed to Istrathaleth. Stuff like that. It's obviously a little bit more avant-garde than most people are going to be expecting, but that gives you the consistency of knowing some characteristic about the unit at face value before you even know anything about it. So if it's a new unit, like the Quasilisk, I've never even seen this unit before, but based on the fact that it has Lisk at the end, I know it's going to be a ranged unit. And that's my way of implying something about the unit's combat role, while still keeping things distinct in terms of names, and having things feel otherworldly, as Zerg should, in my opinion. So you don't really get, like, anything related to something you're used to, especially as a Westerner. Yeah, I could do that milestone. It is definitely time consuming. Yeah, and Stratos, that's kind of what I was going for anyway. Is like most people aren't going to actively know what's happening here, but if they're attentive enough or they hear this explanation, they're going to be able to put two and two together. It's super useful for like when I come up with a new unit, I already have part of their name done as soon as I know their combat role. So it's helpful in that respect for me as the designer. But it's also helpful for me as the designer because I know that players who are familiar with this naming convention are going to be able to just jump right in and understand some aspect of the unit and what it's intended to be. So if they know if it's like a high tier unit but it's melee because of the Rokor suffix, that like the Ultra Core, for example, they're going to be able to say, oh, well, I know this unit can probably like take some damage because it's high tier. So it probably has a decent amount of HP, which means I probably want to send it in first, as an example, perhaps. Just like one assumption they might be able to make without seeing it in use at all. Maybe they scout it in the enemy's base before they attack, and they can click on it and they see some stats and they see like 300 health or something. They're like, well, that's a decent amount of HP, and it has Rokor, so I don't even need to mouse over its weapon to know that it's a melee unit. Like some stuff that at a glance they should be able to expect. They see a unit with Lisk as the suffix, they know it's not going to be turbo range the same way as a siege tank. Whereas if they see Thalor as the suffix, they know they got to deal with some high range stuff. And that's kind of what I'm going for in general. Color changing skin and not speaking. Could you imagine you're just like shifting hues in various parts of your body? Yeah, it's free to install and all that. It's not my game personally. It's the original Starcraft game by Blizzard years and years and years ago. But the idea is that we have all sorts of stuff. We got something like, I think our new units surpassed 100 somewhat recently here, but I don't actually know. I guess we can count them all up again. Calculator time, baby. All right, so we have 3, because 3, 2, 2, 3, 5, 3, and this is another 3. Gotta love those 3s. So that's 21 units only, not counting buildings. I think counting buildings were definitely over 100, but what do we have? 2. Oh wait, that was 21. 4. Wait, what? Some kind of prank? So we're at 40 after Zerg and Protoss, or Terran and Protoss added together. We've got 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think we're above 50 in just units. Yeah, 53. So 53 new units right now. That's not bad at all. Yeah, the one before the remaster. Yeah, I wonder how many people. I'm wondering about that because obviously Alexander was talking about that earlier, wondering about the polls boosting my viewership somehow. I actually don't know anything about them. I just find the polls useful, like unironically useful, just to find out information about people. I figure a lot of people have voted for that stuff without like people who would like never comment, never like type in chat. They might vote for those polls though. So yeah, I can't yet figure out where we're at here. It looks like we have been trending upwards, but that's pretty much all I can say. It's hard to tell if that's related to the polls, though, because I've just been streaming and stuff a lot more regularly, so it's probably some combination. Someone else's video? Yeah, so it's probably like the algorithm recommendation or whatever. Is Zerg winning again? So we have, for those of you who are actually new, we have this poll going for what the campaign that I'm going to be designing, the single player, or in this case, I think it's 2-player optional, but most people will play it single player. We're trying to see which race we want to play as primarily. When I just checked it this morning, or this afternoon at the beginning of the stream, we had Terran in the lead, and now the votes have shuffled around, and we've got Zerg in the lead again. Previously, though, Protoss was heavy in the lead, so people are just continuing to meme, basically. It's nice troll. What's up, Expanses? Yeah, could you imagine? I guarantee you most people would vote for like if I just threw in like the Gorkborgs, like not some fucking nonsense word, people would be like, "Oh, a new race gets added to Hydra if I vote this?" They definitely would have done that to me. Oh, it's probably not the large number of units, George. Unfortunately, we do have some weird lag happening with AI. I haven't noticed it when it's just small numbers of AI, but it's something that we haven't been able to track down. It's something recent, like within the last month or so. Some change to how the AI operate was like created it or whatever. So if you can tell me what, like, if there was a specific map you were playing on or the number of opponents you remember, the number of AI running, that might help me narrow it down. But I've noticed it mostly on multiplayer more so than I've noticed it on single player. Like if I'm playing over Radman with some people or whatever. What's up, Beaver? Yeah, you would have voted for the Gorkborgs, right? The Tagar. Oh, you mean the Tagal from that unused line from Phoenix? I think you might be banned, UED Commander. You can't suggest anime. All right, so the question is, how do we organize something like what we're talking about here? I don't know why I keep typing code instead of just clicking on the button where it's pinned to my task manager now. All right. Let's minimize all this stuff. Sarah Kerrigan. What do you mean? I didn't say anime. I said Gorkborg. And I would type it Gork apostrophe Borg or Bork, whatever I said. I still can't believe that Razorback botted that poll. That is really embarrassing, man. Just win off of your quality, dude. What was I looking for here? Oh yeah, I'm gonna make another. I don't actually know what I should be doing for posts. Where is that anyway? Hey Veek, are you here? Oh, never mind. We have news and we have articles. Why Razorback has to exist? Yeah, good question. Oh, you're talking about my brother? Yeah, but they're not even real. Like, that's not really quite the same thing, man. I would actually play as those guys because they have some fun mechanics. Oh yeah, true. Thank you, Milestone. I have anime race in Toddborn, yeah. Who would have guessed? A few hundred units are present on the map? That's interesting because that doesn't happen to me. Oh, I forgot to edit my script so that it actually shows correctly. I don't think Iron Torch is on the server. Or if he is, I don't even know. Didn't I respond to them, Vic? Unless there were more? Oh. Never mind. Yeah, I know what you you suggested a setting. I figure I think I talked about this when I was actually reviewing it or whatever. I would suggest actually linking to the Monokai theme in the marketplace or something in your description if that's possible, because there's like a million Monokai themes, so I didn't know which one you were suggesting. I ended up not using it anyway because I preferred a darker one, but yeah, what did you want me to respond to though? Like I said earlier, it looks like a reasonable what do you call it? just read some Fagudo comments. Yeah, it looks like a decent add-on for people who like to use that tool. I just hate the tool, so it won't be used for me. What was I doing here? Oh yeah, I wanted to spawn like 1,000,000 units. All right, we have the initial lag. This is with 1,000 units though. Although the test map does have notoriously bad performance. Hybrid penetrator. Let's try this blank map here. This might be more useful. No, we still have that same lag. We'll just need to wait a sec for all of these Zerglings to spin. I do eventually want to have attack add 1,000 Zergling, man. It's got to happen. I think after HYDRA is done updating the extender, he almost finished it today, I think. So he's pretty close. Once he's done updating that attack extender, AI will be able to add something like 32,000 units to their attack force. Obviously, we don't even have that many unit entries in the map or in the game yet, but that will be pretty epic. Imagine being able to select all of these units at once. Would be nice. Imagine not selecting random units. Here, I'll just quickly control-click as many Zerglings as I can and order them to borrow. Maybe that will stop the lag. I'll be here for a while. Yeah. I'll just refresh. Would area units split faster? Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. That's much more reasonable. Now I'll spawn one Ovaleth. I have 2,222 supply. Consumed. Yeah, I'm not lagging with 1,000 units on, so I'm not really sure what it would be then. I definitely think it's probably AI. Were you playing in single player, George? Because I can't, like, I'm not gonna lie. I can definitely imagine a world where the reason why there's lag is like a large number of units, but I can't recreate it in this context. And I'm not really sure what the defining change is. There's a lot of Mutalisks stacked up here. This is like the clown car, but Mutalisks. Imagine an AI attacking you with 1,000 Mutalisks. You would just die, I think. It would be over. Alright, come on. Surely you're almost done. How many fucking Mutas? I mean, I know how many because I spawned a lot. Specifically, 1,111. Alright, boys. Oh, I like that they start to push themselves away faster when there's a lot of them. Alright, this is ridiculous. Yeah, I think it's safe to say the clock is still going at the same rate. The units are flapping at their correct rate as well. Huh. Yeah, it's probably... You're playing with... Are you playing with friends, like other human players as well when you're playing in multiplayer? Or are you just playing with AI? Collision just gave up here, yeah. There's still plenty. Wonder how long I would be here trying to do this. It does give me the idea of like an effect that remaps the unit to be void. It's just pure black. Because of the shadow stacking. That would probably show up in Toddborn or something. Holy moly, I'm still selecting more. Just AIs, okay. Try to lure them away. I guess I can just spawn like... What would even work? Now what I can do is I can spawn Mutalisk 1111 1 or no 4. Oh, I can't spawn any more units because of the unit limit. So I will restart. Hold on. There we go. And now for my next trick. Holy moly! See, now we're getting a little bit of lag because the computer player is trying to like keep its units massed up in the same area. That is a lot of Mutalisks. Holy shit. What would do well against here? Here we go. Hi, guys. Have you ever wanted to watch some Protoss porn? If so, this is like Zerg gore and Protoss porn. I believe those are the terms. Oh, crash. 431-550. Wait. How could it have crashed? There's not even any AI running. What even is this function? Oops. Should attack unit? Is this hooked? Yeah, CCMU, exactly. I don't think I've ever seen this function crash before. Yeah, maybe this is actually something that would happen in real life, in unmodded Brood War. Obviously, that's real life. You go into the simulation to play. Yeah, okay, it's not in here. So that's vanilla crash somehow. I guess what I can do is I can run the game and then I can attach the debugger to it. Say attach to process. Oh wait. You never seen a game have this many units? Yeah. HYDRA is one of those RTS experiences where it's expected that you have like 5 or 6 bases per player if you're alive. All right, let's do yeah, Mutalisk 1111 4. Let's see if we can recreate that. Hi. Okay, we did recreate it. Yeah, it's just like a normal crash apparently. I mean, I don't know how I would test to see if it's related or unrelated. All right, I guess we'll just attach and close. All right, so what did you say? Oh, it doesn't work in. Well, it's not from. I can build fast debug instead. It's not from GPTP, but if you think I need to build it as this, then any other units I'm going to rename? Yeah, tons. Marine, medic, although that's already been on there. I think. Oh, science vessel still. Yeah, so we'll see if building it in debug helps us out at all. I'm gonna switch my music here. I don't mind it for sure, Veek. I just feel there's got to be a better name for a transport. I really like it. I would like the Trojan better if the dropship was like permacloaked or like somehow evaded detection somehow. You know what I mean? Like Trojan implies you can sneak it into your enemy's base. Can't really do that with a dropship. Oh yeah, we were just talking about playing Stronghold in the Discord server earlier. I have never played it before myself. But somebody did buy it for me, so I am inclined to play it. All right, let's try this again, boys. It's debug now, so hi. There we go. Take a sec. Okay. We have damage HP. It crashes on pop add, which means it crashes calling this damage unit HP function in C unit. What do you make of this one, Veek? I think this means since we're all we're doing is we're calling this function, unless this wrapper is incorrect, this is probably just a vanilla crash. Well, you have the whole call stack here. It's weapon damage wrapper, weapon damage hook, damage HP, and then it crashes. It's just in weapon damage CPP. On what was the line specifically? How would it have been? Wait, what? Why would it have crashed on can damage? That doesn't make any sense. Unless I'm misreading this. It's pointing me to 956. I think can damage is like a debug bool that we added for the sake of some other thing. Yeah, it's for this. Oh. Yeah, that's why. And yeah, it's not. This is a prank, basically. This is like if there's no AI town, then for some reason it breaks. Which there wasn't an AI town. I'm assuming this has something to do with it. It's crashing on can damage calculation. Any way to make clickable buttons in the debriefing screen? Yeah, there's probably some stuff we would definitely have to get some hooks written. I've had the idea, for example, of having like a couple of different sections of the briefing screen. So you would have like the actual mission briefing as a button that you activate if you want to watch it, which would be like, here's the characters talking about the mission. There would be like intel that shows you the map beforehand, or whatever information you have from the map. And then there would be like loadout or deployment or something that would allow you to spend your starting money. Like say you start with like 1,000 minerals, you can spend it on obviously a command center, however many SCVs you want, maybe a depot and a barracks. If you start with gas, maybe you drop a factory first, or you just start a refinery or whatever. But yeah, I don't think there's anything like that's just done by a hidden trigger action in the briefing screen. So I don't. There's no like sandbox for you to edit stuff in after the fact. So everything that I was just talking about would take a lot of work to implement. Yeah, I just finished playing Age of Empires 1 on the channel for a Let's Play earlier yesterday. And tomorrow I'm starting the second game, so we'll see how that goes. Hopefully the second game is as good as everybody says. Anyway, damage HP is the pop ad stuff, Veek, and the weapon damage hook is checking can damage. But I don't see how damage HP would even get called. Why would you tell me that one? You know, there's people who already do that. They're called the Star Edit Crusaders. You can play all sorts of. Well, play is a strong word, but it's a lot of ends, and I agree with each one of them. Without modding, you can't even be. You can't even modify AI. You can't modify units. You can't add new units. You can rename units. So you can do what we've been doing the last couple of days. What a mess. Yeah, man. I think we're starting earlier. I started this stream an hour ago. So about 5 hours ago tomorrow, if that makes sense. If you rewind the clock 5 hours, that'll be the time that we start tomorrow. Oh yeah, that is true, Vig. That is true. I didn't think about that. Do you make anything out of this error report, by the way? Do you think that this can damage thing is the issue? It sets to true by default, but I don't know why there would be. Why is this pointing me to and can damage? Why would this ever become corrupted or whatever? It's set to true in our whatever this is, not our stack, but our info. It's too much to go into in chat. We we have a podcast long takedown of him. Actually, I guess he was the topic of like he wasn't the central topic of any one podcast, but he does come up in a couple of the MESC ones. Well, in this case, can damage is true anyway, so I'm not really sure why that would happen. I guess the trick is, well, it doesn't really matter. It's probably fine. Anyway, oh yeah, let me rebuild with the release build. All right, so since we have a couple of new people in the chat anyway, or newer people, I will throw this to my streaming. Where is it? Here we go. I'll throw on some AI fighting, and hopefully we don't crash. The classic. So we'll throw on a 3-on-3. 3. All right, so we've got here a couple of players. We got 6. Teams of 2. Well, teams of 3. 2 teams of 3, in fact. So the races are essentially across from each other. We've got Terrans, top left and bottom right. Zerg, top right, bottom left. Protoss, upper middle, lower middle. So they will be doing battle with each other here. Terrans are running slightly newer AI code compared to the others. Really a nice sort of testament to what's going on there. Quick expo coming out of both of the Zerg players. You'll see that a lot. Zerg do enjoy getting more bases than their other races. Oh yeah, and briefly, Veek, you mentioned earlier that maybe the performance issues are coming from the unit finders. I don't think that would be the case because it's related to, like, as far as I can tell, it's related to AI. It does scale up as the game goes on, though, so maybe it is related to something like that. I'm not 100% sure. Yes, there are 3 races on each team. Kind of curious build coming out from Red here. He's gone for a fast expansion himself. When you expand, you're basically just securing additional resources here, and that could bite him in the ass because we do have double factory coming out from this guy, so he's going to be building some tanks and shit later. Yes, the test map performance is notably worse than the others, but it just has 1 of each unit, or 3 of each unit, I guess, technically, because 3. Right. I guess that could make some sense as to what could be causing it, because as we pointed out, it seems to happen in single player and multiplayer games. Oh, no, that is a bit of a hole in the theory, isn't it? We've never experienced the lag when we're playing with only human players, but I guess we don't have a huge sample size for that, so it is hard to know decisively. Would you have some idea for how to improve this and make it not do that? Interesting double shield battery outpost coming out from the AI. Don't know how to feel about that one. Got our first couple larval colonies and our first action as well. Guys, a little lucky there. There weren't additional Zerglings coming in. These initial skirmishes always have pretty small unit quantities in general. But it looks like the top team is going to win out on this one. Just a couple of melee skirmishers. Meanwhile, the reinforcements are here. The cavalry is here. He's teched up to NG Bay level tech, which has afforded him some more advanced tech from his factories. So he's got the bigger walkers now. Some map control, in a fleeting sense, taken by the opposing team. This is where, if we could improve the AI's awareness a little bit, I would have the AI actually say, hey, we've got some units near an ally who's skirmishing. Let's try to move up there and help him. Here's a bit of a disruption. They have ignored one unit and walked right into a very unfavorable engagement, so that will be over very shortly. You have a Cabalist coming out. Those are some nasty units if you don't have detection. They do reveal themselves briefly with each attack, but it's only for a fleeting amount. Ah, the shield battery coming in the clutch. Or is it? No, he could get surrounded here. What a guy. Oh, we have some action on this side of the fence as well. Not too much. Couple tanks coming out from red. Forward base. Third base is coming out from both Zerg, it looks like, although blue's a little slow to the draw here. And both Protoss kind of slow to take their own expansions. Purple finally going up and taking one of his. Yeah, we should have a nice, healthy mid game for this one. Well, that didn't end very well. Gonna have to call in the backup. I'm not sure about it being a human player limitation like that one, Bilithal. It doesn't seem quite right to me. Oh, just when we thought the battle was over, more units have arrived. It almost looks like the AI is trying to cycle back some of its units, but I promise you that is not quite intentional. Get body blocked by the building dummies. You have red getting harangued over here as well. Be able to repel that attack without too much trouble. Decent amount of tanks. Should I say phalanxes? You can kind of see the victory conditions of each team. They just want to take more resources than the other guy. They want to tech up and get more advanced units the longer the game goes on. So if you've played other RTS games, you'll be pretty familiar with what's going on here. There's two different resources, minerals and gas. Gas is usually reserved for more advanced units. Although all units cost at least minerals. We've got a bit of a joint attack. The armies can and will get much bigger, though. As you can see here is a much larger Protoss strike, or a Terran strike force rolling out over here. Including a Paladin, which are pretty fearsome, since they launch 1 million missiles. This guy's actually done pretty well to split up his forces a little bit, although they're clumping up now. The area damage from the missiles are going to hurt them, but they will drive them back at the end of the day. What was the fate of this base? Okay, Orange ended up losing his. That is going to leave him a bit behind. He can take this base down here, but it's minerals only. There's no gas in that. He does want a little bit more of a gas-heavy base. We are starting to see a bit of a tech switch come out for Blue as well. He's going into Hydralisks, which is going to allow him to contend with some of these more full frontal assaults. I'm trying to keep track of the minimap here. Quite a lot of things happening across the whole map. It would be neat if you could make something like a spectator bot which handled this for you, then you could just sit back, relax, and watch the show. You're right about that one, Jackie. Imagine if I just sat there for like 20 minutes saying your name instead of casting. But yeah, you are right about that. That's an idea. Something that would be further zoomed out as well, using that resolution hack, would be nice. The Zerg have chosen to take this base over here, which is kind of their allies, but hey, maybe they need it, man. They're fighting over this area, and it's not looking too hot right now. What is even going on this side of things? The Terran seems woefully under-equipped, given the fact that he has... Where is his barracks, anyway? Where is he built? Oh, okay, he has a couple of production structures. I just missed them. He could get run over here, though. There's a lot of Zerg. And a lot of Zerg production as well. All of these little bulbous things are the eggs that are going to hatch into units. Usually combat units. Sometimes workers. What a mess. Yeah, it looks like top team's a bit on the defensive. Red might just be throwing, since he has almost no units. Scanner sweep these units, otherwise they're hidden. There we go. Revealing him again. People betting on which computer will win. That would be really funny to me, because, like, you could totally tell when people would be like, this is rigged! He programmed the AI to throw! That would be pretty epic. Alright, now we're talking. This infantry-heavy composition is definitely getting hit pretty hard by the Lakizilisks. Their AoE line damage is hitting them pretty hard, but we've got Mine Tyrants on the field. Now these bad boys spend energy to maintain permanent control of their opposing forces. And eventually, when they run out of energy, the unit returns back to its original owner. As you can see, that was that overlay effect happening on it. So it survived with just a little bit of HP. I don't expect anybody over here to ever breach this line of defense unless they have like just a metric fuck ton of air units, basically. I got a real name. What do you mean? Oh, unless you mean that one in particular, it died. A horrible death. Now they're going to try to pathfind up this ramp and not exactly do a great job of it. And it looks like Red's actually fallen in his main meanwhile, so pranked, of course. And meanwhile, we've seen a bit of a tech switch over here. We've got the brutalized. Yeah, we've got quite a bit of units on both teams, but with Red's main falling down here, and with all of the simulacrums, these things that will be able to split into copies of themselves upon taking damage, it's pretty nasty. Oh, Blue it does have a lot of units, but I don't know that it'll be enough. The AI is definitely not very forgiving, I will say that much. Yeah, Zerg can clean that one up, it looks like. Meanwhile, Terran desperately trying to take care of himself. When the Protoss have more units than the Zerg. Yeah, no, it's fine. It is HYDRA. That's the name of the mod. The name of the game is Starcraft. I think he just splashed onto 2 more. Yeah. Well, just one of them, I guess. Oh shit! Yeah, we pretty much have tech tree parity from the 2 Zergs, although I don't think there are any, he's just got regular Hydras, he hasn't teched up with them. Space still falling. Additional Zerg here. Oh, with the Protoss taking that base too is pretty scary, because this Protoss player has a ton of units. Nice! Nice larval colonies. Holy shit. Ridiculous. Yeah, HYDRA is the new game. Yeah, there you go. They're trying so hard, but I'm not sure it's working out for them. Yeah, I think it's a downhill struggle at this point. I didn't make any of the new graphics you see here. The only one that... Oh shit, Blue's actually in the base? This is impressive. This is like the farthest they've gotten since the beginning of the game. They've bypassed the other defenders, but for how long is the question. I don't think they'll be able to do too much significant damage. A lot of the structures for Protoss were ripped from 5 Nations, which is an asset pack. I mean, video game. Pretty much asset pack, though. A lot of the graphics were also ripped from there. Like the unigraphics for the Protoss. For example, the Architect, which you see very slowly moving over here. That's an air unit in 5 Nations. Because it's a space RTS, so it has no ground units, unfortunately. We would much prefer those. Yeah, Oh, you know what's happened over here? We have some really fast attacking units with the idol over here up top. It's not because they normally attack that fast. It's because there have been vassals that have died near them, and robotic units have a benefit when vassals die near them. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be enough because the rest of the units are coming in. Yeah, Blue's little defensive force over there just fell. Ramp has been breached and crash. 4-3D, A26. Well, I think we knew who was going to win that one anyway. Utterly pranked, of course. There you go. That was a little sneak peek for those who have never seen it before. Or were just interested in watching another game. Let's see if we can get to the bottom of that one. Oh, okay. That's the crash that we would expect, actually. That's the one we haven't fixed yet. So, yeah, imagine when HYDRA is stable, and we can just... That's another thing that I've got to do before we can properly start in the campaign as well. What Jackie over on Twitch was describing is the same thing that has the... It's like the... What even is it? It's like... AI... What? I forget what the Twitch channel is. It's something to do with Starcraft AI. Is it SCAIT or something? I don't know what it is. Hell yeah, homie. Happy to help. Starcraft AI tournament. I'll just search that. Maybe I'll find it. Yeah, SSCAIT. There you go. Yeah, so there's a Twitch channel that has this, basically. It streams StarCraft bots, but they're not playing on mod or anything, so not really the same thing. But as you can see down here, they have the resolution hack, so you have a much wider field of view. I do find myself trying to zoom out a lot of the time after playing Age of Empires. I do try to zoom out in StarCraft. Would probably be nice if we had a wider visual, but I don't know how wide we would want to be. We would want to zoom out necessarily. I'm also not really sure how the resolution hack works or how it would be ported. Guess I could probably contact one of those guys. Probably not exactly, because originally HYDRA was just going to be a slight revamp of the original game, and then it evolved into what it is now. So we were just going to be updating the campaigns and, essentially making it available for 2-player co-op. So there was a bunch of versions of the first map, and then I remade all of this is like the most recent version that was completed in theory. It's not really completed. It's just got AI running on it and it's playable, where the layout was done. And this map was the first mission of the Terran campaign reimagined. It's actually a combination of the first 2 missions, technically. So it had the one where you meet Raynor, and then the one where you are actually fighting Zerg. So Wasteland Station is what this mission is called, but it's a combination of Wasteland and Backwater Station. So in Wasteland Station, you start out meeting Raynor in the original version of this, and then proceed into attacking a Zerg base. In this version of that, Raynor is just one of the players that's playing as Terran down here in the middle. And then the other one is the Magistrate, and then this player is a new character who's essentially in over his head trying to fend off 3 Zerg, which you can imagine would be quite scary. I've then updated this layout with... I started working on a redraft where, I forget when I was last working on this, it was like a month ago or so, I think, where I've significantly increased the map size because I felt like the original map was just too small. And that has led me to start working on this version of it, basically. So it's not really a melee map in the sense that it's a 3-on-3. and there is definitely uneven map design associated with it. There is going to be some pre-play stuff, but for the most part, your objectives will be to defeat the enemy player by destroying their production structures. There might be some cases where your objectives are a little bit different. I'm not 100% sure how much I want to have like non-standard objectives, since I am pushing the macro large-scale RTS stuff as like the main reason to play the game. But I am keeping the door open for other ideas later on. I just don't know, like whatever your objectives are, you should have to interact with the RTS like mechanics that make an RTS interesting for me. You should have to interact with them in order to solve that, so to speak, in order to win the mission. So that's pretty much the only requirement for whatever the objective might be. So theoretically, it could be anything, as long as in order to do so, you're not interacting with a gimmick. Instead, you're interacting with the systems. Will I have heroes? Almost certainly not. I originally conceptualized heroes as pre-placed units that you could just lose, and they would like pull an eject seat out of the Goliath, or cloak, or disappear in a smoke grenade, or something goofy in order to keep them alive. But it's just kind of a nightmare to balance around, and I can't find a way to make them interesting without... I wouldn't even think this is very interesting, but I can't find a way to at least make them tolerable without just making them a non-issue. So that's more or less the thought process there. So I will return in a moment. I have to use the bathroom. When I come back, we'll get started on the planning of the setting that I was talking about at the beginning of the stream, which will be for the campaign. Balethal had asked if I was going to stick with StarCraft's actual setting or if I was going to start making my own. I'm definitely going more towards like rewriting a lot of stuff, but only incidentally. I don't need to rewrite everything about Protoss. I just need to know certain core themes and identities about them, like core topics or whatever. And from the thematics there that I establish, I will be able to derive some sort of like, well, based on what I'm talking about here, then Protoss would make this decision or something like that. So I've already sort of done that with the naming conventions of some of the Protoss units, like the Star Sovereign and the Pariah and the Sanctum of Sorrow and all that stuff. So yeah, I shall return in a sec and we'll talk some shit. Okay, I have returned. Warbringer is a unit name, yeah. You like that one? It's pretty epic. I actually have not even heard about Praetorians. Proposed medic names don't seem to fit for you. I think the problem is, right, like, cleric literally rhymes with medic, so that's probably the best one in terms of just visceral nature. Chaplain makes more sense if you look into what it means. It's just like a priest attached to an army unit, basically. And that's all, not quite the same thing as a battle priest like in Warhammer 40k or whatever, but it's decently close to what the unit's main purpose is, especially with optical flare removed. So it's no longer something where it's like, you can rename it something a bit more aggressive. What I'm trying to get at is something that goes deeper than just telling you what the unit is. Something that has a little bit more flair than that. And that to me is why Chaplain is probably going to be the unit that, out of the two, that I would prefer. Like if I was voting on that poll, that's what I would pick. And probably the one that's going to happen regardless, to be honest. But that's assuming we don't come up with like a third solution that's better. Oh, is it 50-50? That's funny. Yeah, for a while, I think Cleric was in the lead for a while, and then Chaplain slowly caught up. For me, I think Chaplain just is better because it isn't quite so cliche. And I guess the problem is that Medic is basically like, if you had to pull or rank the two names, Medic, well, the three names, Medic, Cleric, and Chaplain, none of those would, like Medic would not sound cliche to people because it literally gives you nothing thematic. It's just telling you what the unit is. It would be like calling the tank a siege tank, right? It's like literally what the unit is. So it's not cliche. It's just boring. It doesn't give you anything. It's basically a nothing name. So that's like the main reason why we're targeting those kinds of units for being renamed in the first place. So when I look at Cleric or Chaplain, I'm thinking, okay, well, at least these ones are not one-to-one descriptions of what the units are, but they still give you enough information to know at a glance the role of the unit. Like if you've never played Starcraft before and you see Cleric or Chaplain, assuming you know the definition of those words, and Chaplain's a little bit more arcane, but not that much, you know that it's probably a healing supportive infantry unit, right? And then it's common enough that you'll see it being used by AI or whatever, even if you don't use it yourself. So it's something that you'll encounter sooner rather than later. But knowing, like, it's not that much more, it's not so out of the woods that it would be like weird to call a unit that. So that's my thought process behind them. So Cleric rhymes with medics. It's also a little bit more normal, I guess. Like it's of the two, it's the less arcane one. Chaplain fits the role better, assuming you know what a chaplain is. And for me, gives you a little bit. It's less cliche, I suppose. I would say that. Like I haven't seen Chaplain nearly as much as I've seen Cleric in RTS games. So in terms of like being overused, I would say Chaplain is definitely the lesser of two of those two in that metric, by that metric. And Chaplain also gives you a nice, a little bit more in terms of like I feel like it's just more grounded as a unit name, whereas Cleric, you almost do think you're like going into some fucking, like, what's next, Bard, like you're almost going into something that's a little bit more fantastical in that sense. Like if I had to argue against Chaplain, I would just say it's not a very powerful name to say. That's probably the biggest issue with it, is that it sounds a little weak to say, like viscerally as a word. Doesn't hold a lot of power. And maybe that does end up being its death now, because Cleric does have a little bit more power to it. Cleric does have a little bit more emphasis. But I think all things equal, well, all things considered, Chaplain gives you more out of the unit's fantasy, in theory. At the same time, the unit literally only heals right now. Like, I think what we'll probably end up doing. Chaplain fits medic's unit's identity. Well, both of these are a little bit more on the religious side, I suppose. Aside from the religious connotations, it's not, there's nothing that's, like, missing or whatever. Like, if the medic started talking about, like, proselytization or whatever, in that case, it's just, like, a traditional military rank of chaplain, so that's where it, like, fits, I think. Although it was for the purpose of allowing for, like, confessions and shit or whatever. One thing that would push it more in the line of cleric is if we ended up doing something that I think we probably will do, which is we will probably make it so that the when units are fully healed, they are also restored from negative status effects. This will be something that when units are fully repaired, that will be the same thing. So Masons and Taloses will be able to do that. Well, respectfully, Don, nobody asked you. There's no option for no change, homie. Medic's going. So I think based on the fact that we're working restoration in almost as like a passive with the unit, I think that can have some pretty neat power. And clerics are mostly notorious for curing disease and whatnot. I've never even heard of cleric in 40k. I think maybe I've seen chaplain once. I've never seen chaplain used in RTS. And the only, I mean, I said this earlier about Conquistador, and then Dynamo waved me with a link to Age of Empires 2, the one like popular RTS I haven't played. But that's still only one example. There was something that was suggested by Alexander, the Caladrius, but that's very like ridiculous. You can't just go around saying like 4-syllable epic words for a medic. What's up, Drakadin? Now that's a name. Terran Drakadin. Check it out. See you later, Burak. Thanks for hanging out. It's funny that this has this is like so divisive. It's kind of funny. Actually, what if I do? Wait, what is Drakadine? Name the medic Primal Destroyer. What does that mean? What does your username mean, dude? Is it a real thing? Yeah, Chaplain is only in the campaigns. But like we said earlier, we can't just ignore... Oh, I guess it is probably in a creep camp or whatever. But we can't ignore units or unit names just because it's used somewhere else. Hell yeah, man. Maybe I'll see you there. It's a little bit earlier, so it won't be as late for you. Drakadin is just a portmanteau of Dracula and Paladin. I kind of like that, though. It starts with Dra. You know what else starts with Dra? Dragoon. And you know what else? Dracula doesn't die when he's stabbed in the head. Just like a Dragoon didn't die when it got stabbed in the head as a zealot. Therefore, Protoss Drakadin, dude. Check me out. New Dragoon name. I'll make a new poll. Hold on. Oh, I can't overload on polls. I'll do the poll tomorrow. We were trying to find a name for Dragoon for the longest time, and nobody's been able to come up with one. Oh, now Zerger in the lead, 1 million votes. Our vote numbers are going down. People are removing their votes and not casting it. That's even funnier to me. All right, Solarian. Oh yeah, I gotta like my own polls, guys. Sorry, I forgot about that. Okay. Whew. That was a close one. All right, yeah, Solarian definitely won this one. Although I thought about that here, but then Chaplin almost caught up. Can I schedule a poll? Oh, I can. Dude, check this out. All right. You guys will get a sneak peek on this scheduled poll. All right, yeah, tomorrow, 13th. Yeah, I'll put it up at 9 a.m. I'll put it up at 8 a.m. There you go. Iron Torch. I like that one. Apothecary is too epic. We already considered that one. Corman, as far as I understand, I don't even know what that is, but it has man in the title. Prank. It doesn't. I mean, it's all the more reason to utilize their mythology and stuff if they're dead, if they're considered mythological. That's kind of the assumption that I put out there, which is why you have like Azazel as a unit name, which is like an angel from the Bible. Yeah, but we're trying. The reason I'm not leaving it as medic is precisely because I don't want a unit name that literally just is, here's what the unit does. I want a unit name that's like implying what the unit is, maybe even outright stating something about the unit's combat role or purpose, like Phalanx, for example, but gives you that flair, that thematic, that little window into what the unit might be like. I don't think about this as making it confusing. Yeah. I mean, medic is pretty much exactly like siege tank, for example, where all it is telling you what the unit does or what the unit is. Okay, but you're literally one man saying that I think this. Like, it's great to have your perspective in terms of knowing what the name conjures up for you, but like you can't rely on that as your argument. Obviously, it has to be a bit more than that. No. I think most people would probably assume that clerics would heal because of Dungeons and Dragons, where clerics are a healer, supportive, religious class. I do also think of religion for both of them, but I don't think that's a bad thing because when I think of religion as far as a title, I also associate that with people holding it in something of esteem. So there would be a lot of respect for medics, right? Because if they're clerics or chaplains, like they have the respect of people for what they do in their role. So I don't really think that that's a bad thing, even though maybe it gives you the wrong idea that they are religious or whatever. But I'm fine making that concession, given that there's no other name that seems to fit. I think the other people who are voicing their opinion are doing so in a way where they are considering their own biases, though, generally speaking. Yeah, the issue with trying to make it more original is that there is no word out there that no word that we've found, I should say, that is not overly dramatic and overly fantastical, but also is original. Well, chaplains are used in modern days as well. They're used now. They're just priests attached to a military unit. And I'm making the connection of priest to healer tacitly, but I think most people would probably do that too if they swam in RTS circles. Well, sounding better is a valid argument, to be honest. That's what governs a lot of the stuff that I was thinking of, like archbishop or archbishop or something for some other unit, not the cleric or medic. Oops, Freudian slip. I think it was for the Reaver or something. I was trying to come up with some name that would be like imposing but religious, and archbishop is not imposing. Yeah, like Mason isn't particularly original because it literally just means worker, right? But it's kind of like, oh, Mason. I'm hoping people try to think about like Freemasons, because then it's like, oh, what the fuck is that? But then they remember, oh, it's just Mason. It's not really that subjective, though. No, you can like say objective statements about how like shorter words with harder consonants are objectively more punchy. And when we are naming units, if a unit is going to have an impactful name, it generally needs to be punchy in that sense. So, like, objectively, cleric is going to be more powerful than chaplain. Like, there's no way you can pronounce chaplain that makes it sound anywhere near as powerful as a mundane pronunciation of cleric. And we're not really talking about language as much as we are talking about we're zeroed in on a very specific subset or sub study, or I don't even know if naming units in a game is something that you can abstract away into a language based study. Maybe in like when you're talking about a more widespread vernacular or whatever, but yeah, if we're grading on an objective scale, then it is pretty easy to have objective value. Even if it ends up being kind of vague at the borders. What's up, Wook? Even if it kind of gets vague at the borders, like you can't tell exactly which unit name is more powerful. Like, I think there's an argument to be made for Solarian and Decurion. I would say Decurion is definitely more punchy, right? But Solarion plays with the solar, like cosmic almost concept. And that makes it a little bit more epic for people who find that more appealing. So I can see where somebody would say that's a toss up. But given two names that are essentially synonyms in the use case we're talking about, there's not really any like argument to be made where the concepts a unit name plays with can offset the power of a unit name's pronunciation, another name's pronunciation. Wait, what are you even talking about? The percentage of the world? Oh, he's responding to what Balefel said. So is your argument an appeal to authority, or do you have any of your own arguments? If not, maybe you just stop talking. TBH. I mean, you're just like restating your point without arguing for it. Well, without validly arguing for it. The Grammaton clerics are an elite law enforcement division with lots of responsibility and authority. Gun katas or katas? Cleric plus Paladin in the same race is a winning combo MO. Clerics are nice and heal, and Paladins deal Wrath. Fits thematically in my head anyhow. Yeah, I guess that's an argument I hadn't considered. This is something that DF brought about, where he said that he wasn't crazy about the Minotaur being the battlecruiser's name, but that Centaur and Minotaur have the same sort of like suffix there with the tar suffix, and so that kind of adds some legitimacy to it. I didn't think about the cleric paladin combination, where chaplain doesn't really have the same like thematic implication that does connect it. So that is probably another point in favor of cleric. Well, use changes, but you need to have objective definitions of a word before you can both use the word in a conversation and mean the same thing. I don't know, man. Now you've gone from like talking about a name of a unit to somehow arguing that we can't even have conversations because it's impossible to agree upon definitions, which is just like demonstrably false, obviously. Like it's a self-defeating argument. Well, I think Don's argument about the Christianity thing is that some people would associate priest with something other than Christianity, and thus maybe they wouldn't connect. Well, I think maybe the term was cleric because it must not have been priest because priest wouldn't have been in discussion or in debate because that's not what we're trying to rename the medic to. But I think if I'm trying to like give him as much of the benefit of the doubt as possible, he was saying that because some parts of the world are not aware of Christian histories with clerics healing the sick, then not everybody would be able to make that connection. But I think most of the Western world is aware of that. At least most of the Western world that would be of age to play Starcraft, of all things. So even if I wanted to defer to the target demographic and have that be a major consideration, that would not be a concern because most of my audience is Western. At least the audience that speaks and gives back information and has discussions like what we're having right now. Whereas like maybe there are a bunch of Koreans who aren't aware of Christianity, but even then I'm pretty sure Christianity is like at least something of a major religion there. At least a non-insignificant religion there. So yeah, I don't know, man. What's up, Milestone? Stone? Yeah, Stratos backs me up here with a nice point there. Pat myself in the back there. No, that's true though. I think if you're gonna agree that anything related to a Christian mythos, well, I think if you're going to agree with the premise that people would not look to Christianity or Judaism or Islam or any of the currently active religions now, like Buddhism and stuff, as a valid religion and instead consider them mythology, like we consider Greek mythology and Nordic mythology. We consider all of those religious beliefs mythological in nature. If you're going to agree with that premise, then bearing in mind that I've already made the decision to use mythological elements from the Bible and from other mythologies like Greek and Roman mythologies and stuff, I've decided to use those as actual unit names and passive names and stuff. Because I would believe that would be what they would call stuff in order to be like tap into that epic nature or whatever. I feel like that totally makes sense. But you never know. Exactly. Yeah, and Iron Torch is also correct about the whole relatability thing. But what does it matter if like one sect of Christianity didn't use clerics or chaplains for healers? Exactly. Like they would be aware of other sects of Christianity that did use them for that. So I'm not really sure what your argument is about this part of things exactly. And at the same time, if you're going to suggest that arguing for or debating names is useless because it's all subjective, then why debate them at all? I don't know. I mean, like we're all interested in debating them. You're the one saying it's impossible to do so objectively and therefore it shouldn't be done, I guess. So I don't know, man. You're still typing. What's up, Shamble Man? Welcome. Yeah, I think as long as we maintain a specific set of criteria for what we're trying to get done, it's totally reasonable to do that. Like for example, for Protoss, my criteria is something like whatever the terms we settle on should probably be widely used, more generally used, so that they can't be narrowed down to a specific faction in history of humans, which is why I'm trying to move away from like Praetor and stuff, because that's just Romans, and I don't want like an entire alien factions names and stuff to be based off of like one obscure or not so obscure in this case of human names in ancient history. I'd like it to be like cataphract, where it's like refers to just a class of military unit or whatever. That seems a little bit more reasonable to me. Or even dragoon, although dragoon doesn't sound Protossy. But if it were, it would be a fine unit name. We wouldn't have to rename it. Yeah, Shamble Man, don't worry about him. Oh, and yeah, that's another point for cleric. But what is your opinion, Don? I don't understand what's informing it, or what even is it at this point. I feel like you've spun around in a few circles here. I think Drakendon has a nice like roundup here where he says just because Terrans are using clerics erroneously doesn't matter. People playing the game will associate clerics with healing, so it serves its purpose there. It is a callback to Christianity for people who bother to look into it and like historical examples of clerics. They'll see the references as they are. So for people who care, they can get even more background on what the thematic is. But most people will look at it and say, okay, that's yeah, that makes sense. Cleric. Okay, healer. Supportive infantry. No, I just said it's not really helpful for like people who say they don't like either usually have a reason for it. Like when Veek was saying that he doesn't like either of the names, he gave a slight background to it, and then I guess we kind of got sidetracked before I could press him more on the details. But you didn't say anything about why you don't like them. Well, I guess you did, but it was in such a weird context that it kind of lost a lot of its value. And now here we are, Shamble, debating the nature of objectivity through the context of religion. But you yourself have played like okay, overused and confusing is absolutely not. These are not compatible complaints. They're overused in the context of a healer, as you yourself pointed out by citing Warcraft 3, which has one case of the unit being used, but or one case of each name, I think, or maybe cleric isn't even in Warcraft 3. But either way, they're a healer in Warcraft 3, which you presented. I think maybe you gave one other example. I can't remember. I can agree with them being overused, but if they're overused for this purpose, which is the only reason why you would say overused, then they can't be confusing because they're overused for the purpose. Therefore, you know what the purpose is. Oh no! You've done it. You've actually trolled me for the past 10 minutes, at least. What a prank. Oh yeah, it was Chaplain was in Warhammer 40k. Is Cleric in Warhammer 40k? He said it's too much 40K that 40% of Christianity wouldn't get it. No, he said that only 40% of the world is Christian. So therefore, the other 60 might not get it or something, I guess. Okay, yeah, I figured clerics probably existed in 40K. But they've got like weird shit where they do like tech priest. They probably have war priest. Yeah, I don't know, man. Unless you can defend having both statements in that context. I don't know. Can you point a hole in my logic here? Can you poke a hole in it and explain to me how I'm pranked? Or maybe you were responding to a chatter. Like how could something be confusing and what was the other one? Overused? Well, tech priest is an interesting term, but it's also like so very much Warhammer that obviously you can't like use it anywhere else. Whereas we don't really have terms for tech worshippers, like people who worship tech. Nothing that sounds cool and epic anyway. Well, tech priest, yeah, I was referencing a Warhammer name when I said tech priest. Preemptively defend tech priest, yeah. I don't know. I guess it's okay. It is just like two words shoved together. Yeah, I don't know. Wait, what were we? Oh yeah, I was Drakadin. And what was the other one? I have like a giant list of names here. See, the problem is there is this Roman term for a unit, a military soldier that gets re-invited back to the military called evocatus. If it wasn't so specific to only Romans and it wasn't so fucking epic of a term, I would definitely be using that for Dragoon because like Dragoons return, right? That's literally what they do. Not really by invitation, I guess, but by force. But whatever. Oh yeah, there's also prefect, but I don't really know. I forget what prefect actually means. Oh, it is actually a priestly thing, I guess. Or it's used in this sense. I don't know if prefect would make sense for Dragoon. I guess that's meaning is leader of an administrative area, so yeah, it doesn't really sound good for Protoss ammo. Prefect could be a replacement for the Templar. I kind of like that it has the word pre as the prefix because you get that like tiny little like language based connection with it preceding something else where it comes in as like the prefect and before and after that archons. Technotitlin or Tenochtitlin. Fuck, I read it as techno as well. I did think vocatus, but that's also 3 syllables. Like, doesn't have to be a 2-syllable name, obviously, but 3 syllables is a lot when you're not like ever swallowing one of them. And in this case, like, maybe if it was like Evocus or something, that would be not bad. But at that point, I guess we could just do Centurion, right? Maybe that's the alternate. I like that that's my fucking description of it. I think Genitor was something that I did come up with when looking through like the Age of Empires unit lists. Or maybe it's something else that's slightly similar to that. I think if people didn't know that a cleric was a healer, then they have missed so much of what you normally would enjoy as the average Westerner, as far as like cultural education and background, that the least of their worries is understanding why I've named a unit cleric. Like, you probably don't pick up on anything from the dialogue. You probably got nothing out of like the trailers and the fucking unit quotes and stuff. Like, you probably got zero, zip nada, if you don't understand cleric as a healer. So that's not even like an argument that works here. That would be like saying the Africans don't understand clerics as healers because like they don't even have a word for cleric necessarily. Like, I don't know what the African word for that. Obviously, African. There's a bunch of different languages in Africa, but you get the idea. It's like, yeah, so somebody who's Islamic isn't going to associate the word cleric with healing necessarily either. But I can't target somebody who's had a completely different upbringing than me, so it's not even like useful to bring that one up there. Call them imams. Yeah, there you go. You don't have to change the hockey. I wouldn't change the hockey. It would still be D. I'll put that in the poll, actually. Let's rename the Dragoon. Oh, wait. Also, I was supposed to put this in the description. And then what else? Oh, yeah, I need my link. All right. I think I'm fine with... Whoa, you can't have Wuckening Like Leaker as your username? What the fuck? What even is like leaker? What would that even mean? You're leaking likes? Well, I know that African cultures have spiritual healers. I mean, like, would they associate the word cleric? Would they even have any background for it? It was just an extreme example of, like, fucking... Like, a term that wouldn't necessarily have any meaning for them, right? Like, a culture that wouldn't have a meaning associated with that term. Wait, why did you switch to Twitch? I'm handing HYDRA to some illiterate. I like that one. Mongolian steppe tribe. Oh. Somebody tried to put a link in the chat, probably got destroyed. I think I missed some chat messages. This is, I should release the poll now? What will I do for my next poll afterwards? Yeah, good luck. You'll have to put it on the server or DM him or something. Even when I approve users' messages, they don't ever end up getting the chats, the links to go through. Weirdos. I like that Dynamo's message, his emoji for simulation is the Nazar amulet because Nazar was the name of the resource in Priority Survive. What's new? Oh shit! Dude, we got some thumbs up, I guess. Dude, I can't believe we got so many viewers just to talk shit about, like, renaming stuff. Alright, I guess I will, wait, how do I cancel this? Okay. Alright, I decided to post the poll immediately, so you guys can immediately vote. Because you guys really want to vote immediately. Did we end up getting an actual result for this? Cleric is still narrowly winning, I guess. I'll refresh the page. Immediately 5 votes for Dragon. I guess we know who's winning that one. Immediately destroyed, of course. I like that one. What do we got for comments? Hold on. Hi. What's up, dude? I don't think it's like Turbo recommending me, but I actually do find them useful, so whatever. I think it fixed itself because when, like, basically the reason why polls were so effective is that nobody was using them. So the few people who were actually getting a disproportionate amount of success, and now everybody's using them, so it's fine. Yeah, this is the I don't think I've even seen Drakadin in the fucking game, like, or in the chat ever. So this is like he walks into the first stream of HYDRA that he's at least commenting in. Maybe he's like watched silently before or whatever. He just walks in here and he's like, "Hi guys," and I'm like, "You're the Dragoon, idiot! Get renamed, moron!" Instant renaming. I just like that. That's really funny to me. It's like some guy just walks into the chat and he's like, "Oh, how's everybody doing in this stream?" Then just gets instantly his name gets appropriated. I mean, it does have paladin as like the ending connotation, which kind of fits for Protoss, I think. Yeah, Drakadin is Chad. It still has 100% of the vote. Wait, what? Oh, you mean the? Let's take a look. Now you are your own favorite unit. You have 13 instant votes. Holy shit. Imagine naming something after a chat member and it being good. I agree. That's really funny to me. Just instantaneous fucking. You have become a unit. I guess I'll just preemptively rename the fucking units now, man. Like nobody's gonna. Certainly nobody's going to change their vote on that one. All right, we'll save it in this. I'd probably pronounce it something really pretentious too, like Dracadine. Oh wait, Dracadine doesn't require anything. He just requires one chat message. Okay, there we go. Wait, you can't change the vote after I've already renamed stuff. Then I have to put in even more effort. Still can't believe how long these videos take to process. I streamed Age of Empires. Oh, that's pretty funny. Wait, what happens if I play it? No, it's still that. I like how when I open up the video page, it loads in at the right time, and then it adds 4 more minutes afterwards, going back to the old time. What a prank. Oh shit, somebody voted for Decurion. It's illegal. Yeah, the difference here, Don, is that I am the author, and I can just tell you what I mean. And when I name a unit cleric, I mean it's a healer. And then you can say, oh, so only one interpretation is correct. I see. Thank you for this information. So, get on my level, homie. No. There's still an objective meaning behind the word. Just because you don't know it doesn't make it subjective. Even if you didn't, if you didn't have access to me, you could speculate, and maybe you would be unable to be, you would be unable to be certain about whether or not something was correct. But that doesn't mean it's subjective. It just means you're ignorant. It might not be possible to fix that ignorance. But that doesn't mean you should act in like bad faith or whatever. Yeah, you. Well, it's not categorically false. I can't think of a world where you would be able to like actually argue for a point using subjectivity. Besides saying you a lot. I mean, that's no, even that's objective because that's objectively epic. Well, I got to turn my music down. Yeah, don't you hate when you move to a new like music mixer guy and he has like a different volume than everybody else? No. Ignorance, if you are ignorant of something, it just means you don't know it. It's not an insult. People usually use it as in an insulting manner, but in that case, I'm just stating a fact. Like, if you don't know the reason for something, you are ignorant of the reason for that something. It's not like a slight against your character. Learn to pronounce noun. I mean, for somebody who literally just posted the definition of something, you might as well have looked up ignorant while you were at it. Man, that is such a self-own. That sucks. One could say you were ignorant of the meaning of ignorant. Holy shit, dude. You can't make that one up. Oh yeah, I've got to rename this to Phalanx Turret. Oh shit, we have to come up with Firebat names later too. Well, if you did know the other meaning of ignorant, or I guess the other connotation of it, because it's not really a meaning. Well, maybe in an abstract way it is. Either way, if you did know that the other one existed, then you're acting in bad faith by assuming that I was meaning a negative manner. You assumed the worst, which is certainly in bad faith. Which flies in the face of you saying you weren't acting in bad faith. So I think we've come to a conclusion of this conversation. No need to take it any further. No, it was just demonstrable that you were acting in bad faith. Wait, what's happening? Oh, this guy's tweeting out at me. What a guy. Yeah, I think we'll just move on to what I was actually supposed to be doing on this stream. Wait, how much time do I have? Oh yeah, I have a decent amount of time. Epic. Yeah, I'm still not sure how I want to organize my thoughts going into the next bit of organization. Like, do I want to go for a Wikidot approach? Maybe I do a mock-up in like Google Docs or something, even though I really don't like using that. What's up, James Gilchrist? Don't mind the chat. How are you? Now, Gilchrist. That's a name. No, I won't do it again. I did earlier. This guy, you may have seen his username in the chat before. Drakadin. He joined, and we just made his name a unit. So that was pretty funny. Looking to get in the campaign. Yeah, we're actually just starting on working on some of the concepts for a campaign. There is some single player content that's currently available if you wanted to just jump in, but for that you can type !HYDRA in the chat. Or a lovely link. Or check the description. Yeah, I guess we'll just make another sheet. Yeah, well, it's not really the place to discuss that in the middle of talking about like a unit name or whatever. So, while I'm sure it's an interesting read for those who are interested in the subject, it's not very helpful. Okay. Oh yeah, maybe we want to shrink this back down. I think I can like set the length, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, I'm not sure. I am looking to rename or redo the voice acting for a lot of the default units where it is appropriate, where they are underwhelming. I think the Dragoon is one of the rare cases where I'm not really a fan of it at all. Like the Marine is kind of cool, it's like not really iconic is the wrong word, but emblematic of that particular unit, right? It's like you have strong associations there. I feel like the Dragoon is kind of like that, but it's overall so boring that I have no concern, no qualms about redoing that one. I made the illusion earlier talking about the Phoenix voice acting when he's in a Dragoon, and it's literally just the same lines that he had when he was a Zealot. I think maybe it might even be the same voice acting, as a matter of fact, but it still sounds a bit better. Like he should probably sound a little bit more beleaguered or something like that. Maybe a little bit in pain, perhaps. Maybe that adds like another layer of harshness to the voice. But I never really understood why it was so different from the Zealot, for the Dragoon, that is. And the Dragoon sounds almost like robotic in nature, where everything's been pitched up or whatever. Right, yeah. There's like some unit responses for the Dragoon, like when he says receiving, that kind of do sound a little cool to me, but everything's so quiet that I don't really buy into it. So I'd probably be redrafting what the unit responses actually were as well. But yeah. If you got a clean enough mic setup and a distinct enough voice from myself, then I'm sure it'll end up in contention there. I'll get back to you a little bit later for that. Yeah, make use of me. I guess that's like emblematic of the unit as well. I just feel like probably the main issue is the upspeak at the end there. Yeah. Playing into the idea that this guy is a proud warrior of the Protoss army and willing to serve even after the fact is more my speed, I think. All right, so wait, I don't really know if I want a spreadsheet per se. Let's do a document. You would think there's like some night mode. Maybe I'll just use fucking Notepad for this. It's unbearable. All right. We'll also zoom up. Hi. Okay. Did I know that I can walk and shoot in Dead Space 2? I did not know that. Oh, no. I can walk. Yeah, but it's like you move slower. All right. See you later, Dragoon Man. Actually, let's check in on the poll real quick. Centurion has 7% of the votes. That's a lot. Contender. Zerg's still in the lead over here. More like sanity. Yeah, I can imagine it would be really painful for like a human, but I kind of like the fact that if we focus a bit more on maintaining the pride of the warrior and having the robot or exoskeleton or whatever, the shell, be like an extension of the warrior in that sense, that feels better anyway, because it's almost like looking on the bright side. So this is why, like, for example, UED Commander made me think about this when he was talking about how in his Stellaris mod, when he set up Protoss as a race, he made it so that the people he made them have caste systems, right? Like Protoss do in the lore. And I personally think the caste system thing is really dumb. But if you're going to have that as part of their faction or whatever, their element, I could see Like, basically he had a situation where the worker class were essentially slaves and they were working in mines. And my first thought was, worker class, they would just get robots to do that for them. Like, they don't need a worker class. They're Protoss. Like, my default assumption for Protoss is that they're just too advanced to have like manual labor. And that kind of super optimistic, almost idyllic outlook, where they find a peaceful use for technology, or even if it's like for their war effort or whatever, it's still like technology handling a lot of the stuff that otherwise would cause some sort of human suffering there, where every member of their race is able to be enlightened in whatever field they go into, be it fighting, be it battle strategy and tactics and stuff, or psionic development, like sort of that sort of thing. Like, that's sort of more my take on Protoss, is that they are enlightened beings, right? And I kind of like that a lot more as their approach. So I'm using that as like a weird example of that tendency of mine. And the connection to the Dragoon is that when the Dragoon is put into this shell, they hopefully find a way to make it so that his experience is not like living pain, the way that a dreadnought in Warhammer 40K would be. And that's also why I think it like feels so good for the Hierophant to be so upbeat when you're using him, right? It's like this guy's like proud that he can serve again. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of the feeling that I get from it anyway. Capitalist communist. Yeah, I don't know about that one. Protoss were not exclusively based on Predator. I think that's where they got the nerve cord thing from, but they were mostly based on Eldar. Brood War was supposed to be a Warhammer 40K fan game, remember? Hi. Yeah, Dragoons are warriors that, like, essentially zealots that get killed on the battlefield, or defeated on the battlefield, but their corpses are transported, or their bodies are transported back, and they're able to be resuscitated. Assuming they're able to be resuscitated, they can be placed into the shell of a Dragoon to continue their service. And then when the Dragoon dies, they're dead for real. It's kind of a weird thing in general, but if you're going to deliver on that concept, I don't think the wounded part could be like in a proud warrior society like the Protoss. I would prefer to focus on the still serving my people element of that, as opposed to like the warrior part of wounded warrior over wounded. You know what I mean? And I feel like maybe the Dragoon, I guess it is more like a Robocop or whatever, like DF was pointing out. But anyway, let's actually get some shit done, because we keep talking about fucking lore. Actually, this is a good place to start. So we're going to talk about Protoss. So Protoss, right? Like, I keep describing them as proud warrior society, right? That's kind of like my take on it. I'm thinking of them as enlightened beings. And what else do we have? So we've got like vast technological improvements that they fear the use of. So it's fear/revile the use of. We'll just say tech. Well, instead of vast technology, we'd say like incredibly powerful military technology. Cannot type today for some reason. Not intelligent enough to resolve matters peacefully. Right. So we're not really talking about like the Protoss in Brood War and in StarCraft 2 especially, but for the like StarCraft 1 is a perfect example of Protoss being really dumb. We're talking more about our ideals for what we want to present in our version of StarCraft, if you will. Like the goal is not to like remake the campaigns in this campaign. We're just making a campaign where Protoss are going to be presented as actual intelligent entities, and so you should be able to take them seriously, right? That's like one element of it. What's up, Iron Torch? We're listing off the qualities of Protoss, as well as the other races eventually, right? So we'll do like, we'll leave a field for Terran here, and then Zerg here. I'm tempted to write here in parentheses, but I won't. Oh, they are pretty repentant in my version. That's like where this comes from. So they have like, they're very technologically advanced, but they're very sorrowful about the deaths that they cause. Centurion has acquired 7% of the vote, yeah. I did see that it had done that. Oh, what's up, Alexander? Why have you died? Can't die. Did you wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat because we've found a name for Dragoon? Oh yeah, the religiosity is a pretty big deal. It's not really religious as much as that I would say it's like. So one thing that I definitely want to do about the whole like Kala thing, their connection to one another, is I want to separate that from the Zerg hive mind, because it's not really the same thing. They don't answer to one entity, but I want them to feel a little bit more individualistic than like they have a deep sense of respect and reverence for their culture and their people, but they're not so like they're not collectivists, right? Like they're not really any one thing. They're not like so far down the collectivist angle that they would be considered collectivists. They're also not individualists to the sense that they are going so far the other way, right? They have like a nice balance there where they take some from option A and some from option B. So they're individualist in the sense that they pursue enlightenment on a personal level. And that's where you get people who are going to be like learning how to be psionically active in battle, like the Templar, whatever those end up getting renamed, right? The mind tyrants and that sort of thing. And then you've got the collectivist nature of them, which is like they're working towards their own independent individual enlightenment for the betterment of themselves and also the benefit of the people around them. And that's kind of what I'm after here. So it's repentant if they're using their incredibly powerful military technology, because what that does, like, they would be repentant for glassing a planet. If they've gotten to that point that they're deploying Star Sovereigns to essentially glass and like nuke the entire area, the surface of the planet, then they've failed earlier than that. Like that's a symptom. That's like a last resort. That's like dropping nukes in modern warfare, right? It would be like we've really fucked up here, because like the consequences are catastrophic. So if they can't resolve it, then like if they can't resolve it without that, then they failed already. Like that's kind of how they would interpret it. So it's not even necessarily a civilian thing. Like they're mostly fighting Zerg. The Terrans are there as well, but the Terrans don't deploy civilians in the middle of their battles. So yeah, I would say that that's probably some element of it. Maybe we could say like something else about them is that they we'll say like pursue individual greatness on behalf of the collective. So that's sort of like what I was talking about earlier. And then we can say Well, reverence for their culture and for great individuals. Just u.txt is fine for now. So yeah. One question I have about Blizzard's Your Protoss in general is what happens if they win because they don't have civilians like Terrans? What happens to their society? That might even be like where the ultimate council, like that, Iron Torch is talking about a really interesting point, which is essentially he's asking like what the end game of the Protoss is, and this is what I was gonna try to get to next. Is that the Protoss? I would like them to almost try to like take up the mantle of their creators as the safeguards or caretakers of the cosmos, and it's like a very incredibly lofty goal, and it's a very wide universe. It's its scale is enormous. They're going to have to deal with some like really fucked up things, and they're going to be at odds with even themselves at times. Like Protoss are going to be led astray perhaps, but like the dominant sector, the conclave, if you will, is going to be the faction of the Protoss that has like the most power, the biggest empire, and they'll be pursuing that sort of like essentially, like we have to figure out why they would meddle in the affairs of Terrans or Zerg, and I think a large portion of that would come from their goal to nurture the universe in a more natural state, and when they can enter a period of deconstruction where they no longer need to maintain some sort of warrior society, so to speak, and they can go back, they can turn their attention inward. That would be something where maybe they go into like virtual reality shit or something. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not really 100% sure where they would go, but the end game is more about getting there, and then that would be like a bridge they would cross to. And I'm also okay if this ends up being like the prescribed wisdom or the goal that they have initially, but the Protoss themselves get led astray over years, over centuries, over millennia, and while they still pay lip service to that ideal at the highest level of some of the factions, they very obviously don't, or maybe not very obviously, but like they obfuscate that, or they don't pursue that as honestly as they could. Like I'm totally fine if that ends up being something that they aren't able to fully live up to. I mean, they are literally trying to not just emulate, but replace gods at this point, and it's not an easy task by any means for any society, even one as enlightened as theirs. So while I'm not necessarily suggesting that like individual like political corruption should happen or something like that for Protoss, I do think that if we can give them a super lofty goal to aspire to, and then have them beget upon, maybe they're the ones who are a little bit more like you have to provoke them into action for something like this, for them to step in. They would be like the guys who have the prime directive, like out of Star Trek almost, and they have to be provoked to action before they can do anything. Although prime directive would be like don't meddle at all, but you get the idea. It's like they don't want the universe to have these like vile forces at play or whatever. I'm reading up some of the questions that I missed here. Yeah, I would say that Shambler's on the right track about the workhorses side of things. That's definitely the robotics. The people who are non-combatants would be like scientists, smiths, people who are going to be like researching the technology that they use, not just for war, but also for like space travel and all this other stuff, right? So they have people who like essentially everybody is like an artist or a scientist, or like any non-combatant would have like a creative position that would elevate the culture. Again, that's sort of like the idea, but their non-combatants are still contributing to the war efforts. Like they might send, like disseminate music or something. I don't know. Not even sure what music would look like when you're thinking out loud or thinking for other people. Dark Templar, that was James Gilchrist's question. I would say do they embody failure and dishonor? Yeah. So in the initial, like obviously Blizzard's lore about this is kind of lame, where it's just like it's like another tribe that was another like group or whatever, that they had their own tech. I would describe my version of that as like, I don't even know if they are like separate from the main Protoss body. Obviously, I'm kind of going for like not needing to have new units or unique tech or whatever for certain subfactions, and I would prefer to just have like unique strategies that are preferred by different factions instead. But in a world where I did have unlimited unit entries in game and I could add as many units as I wanted, I probably would have a bunch of custom factions. So that kind of doesn't really hold up. I would say we would probably have a bunch of different, I don't know if tribe is the right word, but a sect of Protoss. And they would just have their own strategies and their own like values, and they would break away. And again, you have to provoke the Protoss. So if you no longer believe in their grand journey or whatever, I think that's stolen from is Grand Journey stolen from Halo? There's like some weird thing. Maybe it's like Final Journey or something. They have some term in Halo for the Covenant. If you no longer believe in their lofty goals to replace the Xel'Naga in the role of the caretakers and shapers of the universe or whatever, then that would be a situation where you would be allowed, in theory, to leave in self-imposed exile. Obviously, if you commit some sort of crime, you also are exiled, but that would happen pretty infrequently, I would imagine. So while the Dark Templar, like Kabbalist and Mind Tyrant, those are the units that Dark Templar and Dark Archon are renamed, right? So in that capacity, we have, like, we're not really applying the Dark prefix to them, so it doesn't really make sense to call them Dark Templar at that point. I think that they would just be accepted into the fold as, like, these people who have learned different skills and turned them to battle, right? And they would be seen, the utility of them would be seen in that sense. The question is, would they be as accepted, right? Like, is it honorable to strike from the shadows? Is it honorable to bend the mind of your opponent? Probably not in the same way that the Protoss would conceptualize it. So I'm totally fine with that being something that's maybe frowned upon. There's a ton of tech. Like, basically the entire robotics branch in HYDRA is supposed to be frowned upon because automatons are not meant to fight. They're meant to serve the war effort in more utilitarian ways. And if automatons are fighting your battles, you are missing out on some honor there. So yeah, well, Entaro I think just means in the name of. So in the name of a Dune is like a greeting or whatever in their custom. And yes, he is saying in the name of the person who a Dune is the one who saved them. And then it's some really weird shit where they have their cake and eat it too, where a Dune saves them and allows them to leave Ire and go to Shakuras, but pretends that he blew them up. Like, he detonates his own ship or something instead of their ship, and they think, oh, he blew them up. Like, it's so slapstick. So it's definitely really dumb. Welcoming Like Leaker says, no need to make a Protoss a monolith, though. They can have a different sets of beliefs. Yes. So that's what I was getting at a little bit earlier. I'm probably a little bit behind in chat. Apologize for that. I'm still scrolling through and putting stuff in. Yeah, Alexander says Carax, basically. I was probably talking about scientists and stuff. Do they look down on non-combatants? I think they would appreciate the utility that they bring. But there would be an expectation to provide for the collective. It's just that you're pursuing individual greatness so that you can do that in your best way. And so people have a healthy amount of respect for that, I would say. I think it's more than just journey. I think it's grand jury for Halo. They say they're also devoted to the created and species vision that none leaves its confines. Dark Templar are ones who leave that vision, let the deserters go there. I think if there's like if there's a rogue sect, it would be like we defer from this vision. I think if they have a disagreement about how to accomplish the same goal, that would be like healthy debate. And if there's like something where you can't resolve the issues through debate, you would be allowed to leave, like, obviously peacefully, and attempt to find, use your own solutions. Unless your solutions were really fucked up in the eyes of the hegemony. And that's where things kind of get a bit more subjective. And that's where I think, like, if you could imagine somebody who does lean into robotics a lot more, like this is an idea that I've had for a faction of Protoss that is super heavy on robotics, and they will use other Protoss where necessary, but they think that like sacrificing Protoss lives does not benefit anybody. Especially since I still want to maintain that Protoss are lower in population amounts, which is why they leverage robotics in the first place. I want to maintain that that's the case, and they only like most of the time they only leverage robotics when a loss of Protoss life would be so great. But even then, people think of like a loss of their lives as a willing sacrifice. They think it's honorable to die in pursuit of this goal. They're kind of bought in that sense. Maybe even one could say cynically, if they looked at it that in that lens, they could say they were brainwashed. So I would say something to the effect of like, there would be a difference of opinion, and if that difference of opinion has like we don't want any more Protoss to die unnecessarily, we're going to make extensive use of robotics. We're going to research more like ridiculous, perhaps amoral versions of robotics, like the Demiurge, for example, that just bends the will of anybody that it attacks. Stuff like that. Like that's really crazy stuff that would 100% be profane in the eyes of the conclave, the hegemony, the empire. And if you're in a situation where that's the case, then it's like it's easy to see why they would become an enemy. They would become in line with that. But it's also easy to see why they would be dangerous and difficult to just crush and deal with in a military conflict. Like that's a faction that can justify its coexistence, or not really coexistence, but its existence alongside the main faction, and also defend itself. Like you can see why they would be at odds. You can see why they are powerful enough to defend themselves, and you can see the reason for it. Like it's something that you can even be sympathetic towards. Like, yeah, if we have all these robotics, there's an argument to be made there. Just like there's an argument to be made in favor of the conclave. Like I don't want to paint people as like completely unreasonable, like Judicator Aldaris, where he's like, yeah, Zerg are on our homeworld, but we're going to go run after Tassadar. It doesn't make any fucking sense. It's really stupid. It makes him look like a complete buffoon. And so I would say, if we're looking at this in that way, if you can make a good argument, a compelling argument for both sides of any conflict that we have with Protoss on Protoss action happening, when Protoss are concerned, that's when we're sort of tapping into that enlightened state where they're both like very well versed as thinkers, but there's still somehow we've worked in some just inalienable differences between the two sects, between the two factions, and this is how we can have conflict between them that still feels well-founded, at least in my opinion. Some people may say that, like, well, Protoss should surely be able to resolve that conflict, but if we agree on the premise that this is an unresolvable conflict between the two, and we understand why these Protoss would fight each other as members of different factions, then we could have Protoss on Protoss gameplay that isn't, like, basically just because the writers wanted to lazily have a conflict between two Protoss tribes for the sake of variety in a campaign. I mean, that may be what's fueling my motivation for something like that, but if I can justify it in the lore in a way that feels good, I think it's totally reasonable. Weren't Protoss fighting themselves before Kala? I think that was in the manual, Veek, yeah, or alluded to. Non-warrior pacifist Protoss are their version of people on welfare. Well, I don't think you would have pacifist Protoss, but you wouldn't necessarily have everybody being a main enemy or whatever. Like a main component. Hold on, I have to scroll back up. Holy shit, there's a lot of chatters. Hi, chatters. Hi in the chat. Christians don't have fun in Saudi Arabia. Hey, that's rude. Warrior lifestyle to be prevalent in the same sense that having a phone computer is for us today. Some non-warriors would exist, but are relatively sparse. Or if even like they might have a warrior lifestyle, but they're like conceptualizing the battle against like if their foe is whatever's stopping them from being able to conquer the challenge necessary to invent the new thing or paint the new painting or make the new music. Like it would probably just be a mindset for them, if that makes any sense. That's kind of a goofy example, but hopefully that was sensible enough. What they would think of those non-individuals. I think they would just be, the conclave being those non-combatants is another point. Like people who are commanding from up on high, like military generals and stuff, are technically non-combatants, even though they're contributing to the military conflict. I think there's like a place for all of these people, right? And everybody would feel like their position is earned because of their individual greatness and their pursuit of that. And when I say everybody, I'm being reductionist, but you can imagine like most people would be fine with that. I also think it's fine if this ends up being like one of those things where what were we just fuck, I completely lost what I was talking about. I was reading too many chat messages at the same time. Zerg, enter here. Zerg here. Oh yeah. Something we were talking about, like the different things that we would have for like lifestyles for Protoss and whatnot. Monolithic hat wearers. No, I completely lost my point. Fuck. I'll probably remember later. Yeah, I think we've figured out like what they do for non-combatants, right? Like non-combatants assist the war effort in other ways, e.g., science, art, tactics. Yeah, I think like architecture would be seen as art, like ship concepts or whatever would be seen as art. You know, like at the risk of triggering, oh, I don't even think Balethel is still here. There's a line in one custom campaign that's delivered in such a gay way where he says, "Battle is art," and it's a Protoss saying it. But like unironically, for to them, like a really like skilled combatant would probably be an art like artistic in that sense. That would be seen as like a work of art. So that's a case that's a little bit more shaky. But I could imagine something like, you know, somebody designing, like delivering a way that, like, there's a reason where the Protoss tendency for flamboyance and having something that's bombastic, like the unit names being so like extravagant, and their nature being so like upbeat in that sense, where you have like the people they're giving it full force. Like the Legionnaire and Hierophant voice acting I've done is kind of indicative of this, right? Especially the Hierophant, where he's like, "Hail, leader!" You know, he's super happy to be there. Almost that's what it sounds like. He sounds like he's actualized as an individual, an entity. Well, enlightened beings is kind of like a catch-all term. Basically, it means that they've achieved some sense of like that kind of speaks to their goal that Veek was also reiterating, talking about like not really controlling the entire galaxy is probably the wrong way to phrase it, but they have this like really lofty goal of essentially replacing what the Zelnaga were doing, like returning to the somebody to the post of being the universal shaper or the universal custodian or something, right? Like the caretaker. And the idea is that they've found a way to all agree on a lot of the core principles, right? Like the vast majority of them agree on core principles. And maybe they disagree on how to get there, but as a society, they have become enlightened in that sense. And then they pursue that individual enlightenment and greatness, like it says here in the third point, because 3, on behalf of the collective, on behalf of the goal that they're all sharing in that sense. So it's part like collectivist in nature where you're serving the greater good, as you say, and it's part individualist, knowing that I have a part to play in serving the greater good, and without me, my people will be worse off. Therefore, like it's fine to celebrate greatness. Like they celebrate, they reverence for their culture, point 4, and for great individuals. Like the second part there is really big because it's not just that these guys are all like communist or whatever in nature, where they're all about the community, they're all about the people that they serve, right? The faction that they serve. They're also about who are the titanic leaders of this space. Like who are the ones who are like focal points that achieve greatness, and they serve as individual inspiration for these Protoss to actually strive towards those goals, right? So they've got individual goals that they want to strive towards. They've got collectivist goals and like species wide goals almost that they also are looking to do. And all of them are lofty. Like the vast majority of Protoss will not ascend to like Titanhood almost, or like godhood in a way, like for their culture. They're not going to ascend to that level. Just like it's odds are they're probably not going to succeed in their main goal of being the creators or not creators, caretakers. Yeah, like the Xel'Naga thing of like them being the caretakers, they're probably not going to make it there. Like that's kind of the point. Is it's like so outrageous of a concept in the first place. The Xel'Naga themselves didn't make it there. They were destroyed by their own creation, which is like a cringe way to have them be dead, I guess. But like, okay, they their own hubris or their own like experiments were their downfall. And so I'm not saying that they're gonna go find Xel'Naga artifacts and use them or whatever. I'm just saying that like they believe that that is what they were created for and engineered for. They also believe it to be incredibly important that there is a faction. They've looked around in the universe that they exist in, and it's just like disaster looming on every corner. There's like giant superpowers on the Terran side. There's enormous amounts of like unrest happening because of the Zerg that could devour all life. Like that's what they're mostly concerned about. They obviously devoured the creators and the gods of the Protoss. So I'm not saying that I'm working in the Xel'Naga as like a plot point. It's more so the backing of the Protoss themselves. Like the Terrans themselves have the ability to just like destroy entire planets, like just whatever, in an insane fashion. They can just like, they can do some ridiculous amounts of like nuclear bombs and whatnot. Well, I think the fact that the Xel'Naga died means that they're not really a god in the traditional sense. So I don't really see the Xel'Naga as limiting because I don't view them as that important. Like I'm accepting the presence that they created. They helped to engineer Protoss and Zerg, but beyond that, I don't really care about them. Like they're just background. And notably, all this information is background. This is going to help us make decisions about the storyline and about how, most crucially, how Protoss characters react to situations and what their actions are going to be. This is essentially foundations for us to base that off of. So we have like something that says, oh, I wonder what the Protoss would do here. Well, let me refer to their list of characteristics. And then let me consider the options. And let me pick which one makes the most sense based on these characteristics. It's kind of like making our job a little bit easier when we're writing the story. We don't need to present all this information to the player. We don't ever need to talk about this stuff like in actual games. It doesn't matter for it doesn't matter. We don't need to, convince the player that all these things are true. We are going to act as if they are the case, and we're going to use that to inform our decision making when we're making the actual story. And that's going to make things very consistent. Whenever Protoss are involved, you know that if something doesn't go according to this schematic, then it's because something really weird has happened. Like something really weird has happened. Like either we've fucking dropped the ball, like I've dropped the ball as a story writer, or more likely there's like a greater design to it, and we should keep watch of that. And that's kind of what I'm getting at here. Is like we want to have a consistent script to follow almost for what the Protoss do. I'm going to ignore the StarCraft 2 lore and most of Brood War as well. And for all intents and purposes, most of the original game. Like, I'm not trying to have this be a massive rewrite. I'm just basically, like, coming up with what I want the Protoss to embody, and then we're rolling with that. And in some cases, it's inspired by the original Protoss. I might even take some ideas from, like, unlikely sources, like the books or StarCraft 2, if I find that they could work in my setting. Odds are I probably won't ever do that, but that could happen. But it has no real significance or bearing on that. Like, it is my story. I'm going to tell it the way I want to. And I'm pretty sure I'm equipped to do that in a way that will be more satisfactory than any of the first party content that Blizzard has produced. I also think, to Iron Torch's other point about like if humans knew there was a god, there would be one religion. I don't even know if that's the case. Assuming the god allowed us to have our own free will, assuming we even have free will, obviously, but assuming we could make decisions based on our own reasonings instead of like the god just like deleting all unbelievers from existence or all people who didn't worship him or it or whatever. Assuming that that wasn't the case and they were allowed to continue their existence essentially unperturbed, there'd probably be a ton of debate about like, is this really a god? Like, is that really the case? Is it incontrovertible? And then even if it was incontrovertible, you'd have to convince all the people who would say no, and in spite of that. So yeah, I think it's unlikely that that would even work for humans, let alone these enlightened being aliens who seem to have bought into the Xel'Naga as gods. But again, there's going to be disagreements for like there are very few disagreements in terms of Protoss that don't agree and don't align with their core goal of shaping and taking care of the universe. There's very few Protoss that fit into that bucket, right? Most of the disagreements and conflict from Protoss on Protoss action in that sense, most of that conflict is going to be coming between, like, we don't agree on how to accomplish our goals. We agree on the goal, but we disagree vehemently on how to accomplish that. There's going to be tons of like reasonable debate that we don't even need to write down, by the way. Again, this is just backing. Like, we can have reasonable debate that gets resolved. But then there's going to be a ton of stuff that doesn't get resolved, and that's a little bit more important to know about as the writer, so that I can make intelligent writing decisions about those Protoss factions that would make war on one another. What's up, Pounsley Grin? Yes, I'm not going to have a fanfiction Mary Sue Fire Angel save the day, I promise. Protoss are TOS supremacists, yeah. In a sense, but they have a good reason to be. I mean, they look around and they see like Terrans operating on like principles of greed. They've basically taken like individualism to a pretty negative sense. Like tribalistic, right? Like that's more what would describe Terrans, where there's a lot of individualism and then the collectivism is limited into like just the family or just the tribe or just the organization or whatever. And obviously at all different levels, like that's pretty obvious, I think. They look at Zerg, and these Zerg don't seem to have an end game to anybody other than the Overmind, and I don't even think it's important to know what the Overmind's end game is, by the way. I would say the Zerg probably pose the biggest threat. I want to show up, this is where we can talk about Zerg, right? A force of nature. This is how I want to conceptualize the Zerg. They're not like an entity that you can reason with. You can't talk to the Zerg. They are going to do what a force of nature does. You can't talk to a fucking typhoon. You can't talk to an earthquake. The earthquake's going to do what an earthquake does, right? That's like the nature part of it, right? And the force is the Zerg sweeping through the galaxy and annihilating everybody. So that is probably the biggest thing, the main point that I wanted to make there. Yeah, and I'll just say like species wide goal of ascending to caretakers of the universe. So yeah, for Zerg, we don't know what their end game is, right? I'll say unknown end game. Well, we'll say end game unknown, perhaps besides the Overmind. Yeah, I'm glad you're having a good time, man. Right, and Shambler, you're making an interesting point there that I hadn't even personally considered, because I would think that they would feel sorrowful about fighting themselves or fighting Terrans who can clearly like think in some capacity, not to the level of Protoss, but whatever. However, it could be really interesting for like the first couple centuries of battle with Zerg being like, we're trying to do the honorable thing still because that's our culture. And that's where some of the conflict happens. Like, no, when we're fighting Zerg, send the robots at them. Like, develop these robot combatants that can handle this stuff. And then, like, the pushback on that angle. Like, what if there's more than just Zerg there? What if there are Terrans there? Like, what's the protocol then? Like, what if there are other Protoss that we're fighting? And, like, we've got to deal with that. Like, in such a situation, how do you just rely on only robots attacking only Zerg? Like, it's clearly unrealistic and stuff like that. And there's a lot of disagreements there. Like, no, we should be honorable in the face of a dishonorable opponent, such as a Terran or even a Zerg. Like, that shouldn't change how we act as Protoss. That might be one of the arguments. And then the other one is like, well, I don't want to lose Protoss life. Don't want to send my men to death. So I'm going to use robots instead. And that could be like where some more stuff happens, right? Then you could, of course, have what is otherwise a very boring debate about should we control Zerg and use them against themselves. That's already kind of shaky ground here. We already don't really like, if we're the conclave proper, we already don't really like the mind tyrants dominating the minds of their opponents and mind controlling them in that sense. We already are not really big fans of that. We allow it where it makes sense because these people have already offended by attacking us in the first place, be they Terrans or in some cases Protoss, although even that would probably be even more morally reprehensible perhaps. But okay, you're going to talk to us about controlling Zerg, like these like arch nemesis of us, essentially. Like, that's beyond the pale for a lot of people. But maybe there's somebody who says Why try to defeat these creatures when we can use them to like against themselves as like a virus within themselves almost? Like surely there's a reasonable thing to explore there, even though it's normally very tired and boring. I could totally see like a way where this could work out properly. What's up, Hoopy? The Protoss wouldn't feel remorse in killing the Zerg specifically. Remember that if they're attempting to be caretakers of the universe, then that includes taking care of Terrans as well. And so anytime they have to like have massive, like put down in a massive insurrection almost, right? You could conceptualize it as that. And do so with a massive loss of life, that's really bad. Also, anytime they have to essentially make a planet, like render a planet no longer habitable by their actions, that's bad, even if the only victims are Zerg, because that restricts the amount of habitable terrain there is, right? And that's something that they don't want to do either. So I think there are angles to take for any of it being sorrowful. And that's where I think you have that repentant angle come in. It's probably not going to resonate with people as much. And maybe that's a weakness of my planning and something that I can address with given a little bit more thought. But that's my initial counter argument there. Their end goal is to preserve their own existence and reproduce themselves. Yes, but that would make sense if they are just like an organism with sapience but without sentience. Clearly, the Overmind is capable of higher thought and reasoning. Maybe we change that though. Maybe we make it so that the Overmind itself doesn't really know what its end game is. I'm open to that. Protoss can be okay with stabbing someone in the back. It can seem as an honorable form of victory in their culture, since it's a loser's fault for not being good enough to see what's coming. I kind of like your angle there, DF. I think that would be where you would have different personalities of Protoss rather than a species-wide disagreement or whatever. You would just have like the Zealots would probably say, a real Protoss warrior, so to speak. This is obviously like dumbed down for caveman levels, but a real Protoss warrior would just fight them, and then the Kabbalist is like, well, if my enemy is too stupid to see me or whatever, that could be like his angle. There's ways that you could make that work. So I kind of like that could lead to some small, but not humanizing in a negative way, like ways that make these kinds of characters relatable. That could be a way to take that angle for it. But weapons of mass destruction, yeah, it's a Pyrrhic victory when you can't even make use of the planet for positive use or mine it yourself or whatever. If Zerg were real, they would be highly advanced like the Protoss because the Overmind could work 24/7 to gain knowledge by using his units. My goal is to have the Zerg essentially be like very advanced, but in a biological only sense, and then push the definition of like the extent of what biological only means, where most people would consider certain things like out of the question. Like you wouldn't have like nuclear weapons or whatever if you were biological only. Like, I'm not saying we would have nuclear weapons in Hydra for Zerg, but you could imagine a scenario where something is like so explosively destructive, and it's because it's like a super congested amount of bioplasma or something. I don't know. You could come up with some term or some sort of pseudoscience that fits the bill and still is, adequately biological in nature. And I think that that's sort of a way to address the point about why Zerg are not very, advanced on paper. The advancements can come from evolution in that sense. Yeah, like butter. Yeah, except probably not butter. I don't think that's a very smart unit concept. Perhaps the Conclave can become self-righteous and seek to escalate the war in order to legitimize their own authority. I'm not sure what exactly you mean by that. I'm going to try to come up with something there. Yeah, Hoop also brings up a good point. Like the Hydra version of Plague, where it just spreads when a unit dies, is like, I mean, we jokingly call that like coronavirus or whatever. That is pretty fucking devastating. So the conclave becomes self-righteous. I think it's very easy for, in theory, it would be very easy for somebody to go from being enlightened to being self-absorbed and too sure of themselves and like trip over that line. I'm not sure if it would be as easy for Protoss to do, since we are trying to get them to be super, super enlightened in that sense. My whole channel is not monetized, so I've just disabled monetization so that hopefully YouTube serves less ads to people, in case they're dumb phone posters. So yeah, I don't make any money or anything off of YouTube. No reason to, TBH. People can just PayPal me if they want to pay me. Although there was some guy who I said email me money, and he emailed me pictures of money. It's because my email is my PayPal, but it was really funny when he did that. I thought that was hilarious. They can allow Zerg to infest Terran homeworlds and drag out the war. Spanish Tacit Reader. Oh, I'm not too worried about like the main story of StarCraft. We're going to be taking place in a completely different area. I guess that's something else that we could talk about, like as like keynotes or something. And it's like setting is far the fuck away from the main campaigns. Timeline is relatively irrelevant / vague, but Overmind at least is still alive. I don't know if we'll say much else. Conclave is the dominant proton. I guess we can say, we'll just say like it is ambiguous as to whether the original campaigns even happened. We'll say that. And then we'll say, for Protoss, we'll say primary faction or whatever, and it'll be like Conclave / Empire, I guess. I don't know if we'll keep the Empire title. For Terran, it would be like primary faction. There isn't one. There's just a ton of Terrans. And then for Zerg, it's like Soul faction. Well, I guess we can keep it primary for consistency, but Overmind's Zerg, Soul faction, actually. All right, we'll probably like clean this up a little bit later. This is just like a very quick and dirty rundown. The Overmind trying to find its purpose in the universe is a cute idea. Yeah, Shambler has this idea, right? I kind of like the idea that that the Overmind doesn't really know what's going on, but like has certain directives to follow, but doesn't necessarily hasn't engineered the reason why. I still would like to give it some sort of sense of purpose, but as Veek pointed out, it is kind of, well, he alluded to it anyway. It's kind of difficult to do well. You know what I mean? I need a donation link. It's just donate. Oh yeah, I guess I could like make it easier for people or whatever. Yeah, I could probably just update that later. A true conquest isn't what they would perceive as a genuine victory rooted in some exclusive superiority over one's opponent, if that makes any sense. So DF is sort of taking the angle of like Protoss would only consider a victory true or honorable if they were able to defeat their enemy without resorting to like massive weapons of mass destruction, essentially. I don't know. The only concern I have with this kind of angle is that it does make the Protoss seem a little ignorant, or not necessarily ignorant, but maybe like foolish for not using weapons of mass destruction if the enemy uses weapons of mass destruction. Like, I assume if they were fighting other Protoss and the other Protoss faction starts warping in the fucking Star Sovereigns, they might be like, we gotta fire our nukes too, guys. Like, we can't just let this happen. So I feel like that would probably happen. If Terrans are using nukes, I guess it's not really that supreme in the same way. Maybe if they're like deploying all the Phobos in the world and shit, like that might be insane. Yeah, I don't know. I'm still not 100% sure about that, but I like the idea. I like the concepts it plays with, so I'm just going to have to figure out how to implement that. Right, yeah, that's another angle too. I like that essentially what we've been able to create here is like a nice canvas for a bunch of other ideas to pop up, and then that you can instantly see where they might be able to slot in. That's like, I think, a sign of really well-rounded foundation almost. It's like, oh, I can put that part of the structure here. You know, like I can see where it would fit. I definitely want the Terrans to feel like they have no idea what the fuck is going on, but they are determined to stay alive regardless. Because you've got the Protoss that are like sort of enlightened beyond understanding for a lot of Terrans. There would probably even, in a funny way, be like a group of Terrans that would worship Protoss or follow them and like think that they want to dedicate their service to that or something. Like you could imagine like it was a mind tyrant, mind controlled a certain enemy Terran leader, and he was instantly flooded with the convinced of like the purpose of the Protoss, and then like after the mind control wore off, he was like still had all these ideas in his head, and then he led his people there or something. I don't know. You could imagine like some weird kind of wacky scenario where a cult leader might be able to like lead a Protoss friendly faction of Terrans. And then the Protoss would be like, what the fuck do we do about this? Like, there'd probably be a ton of protests that would be like, we don't want you. You're a lesser race. Go away. Like, if you really want to help us, just like stay out of conflict. But then maybe a less scrupulous Protoss faction might, employ their services, so to speak. You could see where that might work out. Or maybe they simply don't listen. Maybe they're like, no, Protoss, we will not leave you alone. We will come out and help you against the Zerg in every case we can, or something. There's ways that you could work this in, is all I'm saying. I kind of like that idea. What was in War of the Tribes? Or what are you responding to specifically? Well, I think it wouldn't be the cold, uncaring way of things. The way things are would surprise the Protoss necessarily. I think they would instinctively, or they would have understood where things are, right? The way things were. They understand that sometimes it is necessary to deploy the Star Sovereigns to glass the planet or whatever. But even then, they would still view it as a failure, not because they're like too idealistic, but because they feel like they could have circumvented or avoided the use of that if they had won earlier or something, right? Like if they had been more decisive, or if they had performed better as warriors or as leaders, they may have been able to take a victory a lot sooner and without as much loss of life and so on and so forth. Oh, oh yeah, we had to control UED commander, dude. I forgot about that one. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not saying that would be the premise of the campaign. I just mean like if you had a mind-controlled Terran leader, imagine like in order to control his mind, he gives him all of this information that have convinced all these other Protoss of what the goal is. I'm sure it would convince a Terran as well. So maybe he can't get to grips with that. Like I imagine after you're mind controlled, your instincts are still kicked in. The mind control wears off. You're like, I don't know what's happening, and then you continue shooting like against the Protoss or whatever. But if you survive the battle, like you're probably fucked in the head. Just thinking about that. Protoss, which are basically order, Zerg that are total chaos, and then we have humans, the dummies. What I like is that it's not quite so binary in that sense, or trirary, whatever the fuck. The order and chaos thing, the chaos is definitely true for Zerg, I would say. But even then, they have a semblance of order insofar as they have a single guiding, factor, the Overmind. I'm going to build some things into the biology of the Zerg that would still allow Zerg to fight one another. Because the idea is that the Zerg themselves are made up of, so we'll say Zerg swarms are made up of creatures that resort to instinct or revert to instincts in the absence of a control node. We'll just leave it vague like that, because that could be like Ovaleths or the Overmind itself or Cerebrits or whatever. Yeah, being mind raped is not good long term. Who would have known? But you can see where like chaos can be set up into different layers. Like the chaos is somewhat controlled when you have the Overmind calling the shots or a Cerebrit calling the shots. But when shit goes south and there is no Cerebrit or there is no Overmind able to exert control over the Zerg, that would be a situation where suddenly, like, the Zerg go back to instinct, or maybe they fight each other. Maybe Broods, Ovaleths try to maintain control of everything, and they're like, "Fuck this, dude! What's going on?" Like they wouldn't be sentient in the same way, but their instincts would be to command Zerg, right? That's what their instincts generally are. It's just they would receive no Like, I kind of had this idea a while back for Stormborn, where the Renegade Zerg in that mission, I didn't want them to seem super like disorganized where they're fighting each other. I mostly wanted it to be like they have no dominating force telling them what to do. They cannot adapt necessarily. What instead they will do is they will do what they were last told to do, which might be fight Zerg or fight Terran or fight Protoss or whatever. So they're kind of following the last received command, right? In a chain of commands to do. So perfect for AI. That's exactly what AI do. So that's fine. Yeah, I think we have a lot of really cool ideas here in general. I'm not sure how well developed they will all be, but like Terrans, I find is kind of the easiest one. They're like the ones that are the most pliable. You don't have to come up with like really compelling reasons. Well, it's not difficult to come up with compelling reasons for why the Terrans would be against each other or doing certain things. The Zerg, it's a little bit more on the biological scientific side, and that's where we can lean on the science fiction aspect of this whole thing. We don't have to worry about it making a perfect amount of sense on a sci-fi level, because this is sci-fi. It's not hard sci-fi or anything. So as long as it's believable on its face and you can accept the premise, then your suspension of disbelief will be preserved. We don't even need to opt into saying the Zerg's control structure has been disrupted. We must build more ovoliths or some bullshit like that. You don't even need to worry about stuff like that. As long as somebody makes an errant comment about this, like you can establish that maybe they've seen this before, maybe this isn't the first time that Zerg have fought each other on the Protoss's watch, for example. Like, it doesn't need to be like, the less we linger on it, essentially, in the campaign, if it does come up, the more natural and believable it will seem in general. And the Terrans, like I said, like it's kind of easy to come up with like reasons why they would fight each other, or reasons why they would not fight each other, or reasons why they would not fight one of the other factions. Although with Zerg, it's a little bit harder. You probably have to do like cult shit, like insurrection almost, which I definitely don't want to have to rely on. But that is like one option, obviously. And for Protoss, we spent the most time on them. I feel like they're the most well developed, so we'll definitely come back and do some more of this a little bit later on. So yeah, that's pretty epic. So I will say it's pretty much it for me. We definitely did a decent amount of like theory crafting and whatnot. So I hope you guys appreciated that. Zerg immunity to damage for everything except DTs. Yeah, that's not going to last. I think instead we have like special damage types or whatever. We'll just have Cerebrits become vulnerable if they're cut off from the Overmind's power to resurrect them. And even then, even if you kill a Cerebrit, you have to like do away with the corpse, probably through like incineration or disintegration or something. So that's kind of boring and technical, but the idea is that if you can somehow separate it, like maybe block it psionically or chemically or something, it's possible to do it. It's just more of a headache to do than, something like just killing a normal Zerg unit, right? And then the reason why the Overmind doesn't revive every Zerg unit is simply because it's a very expensive process for him to do. He doesn't have the ability to do that. So you could also engineer this artificially, brute force, by just killing a bunch of different Cerebrits over and over again, and eventually the Overmind would have to regenerate his powers or something. So we can do something to that effect. I think that's totally fine. Yeah, pylon around the Cerebrit, the field will disrupt it. There you go. Nuclear strike. Yeah, I feel like nuclear strike is probably, I don't know if it would be enough, but maybe radiation could be a legitimate thing that you could use against Cerebrits. Like, I don't know how I would feel about that. So we'll have to think about that a little bit later. You understand Protoss pursuing lofty goals, discipline, enlightenment, combat as the way their racial psyche is wired. A species-wise goal is weird. Well, it's because of the fact that they have that like groupthink thing, not groupthink in the sense of like they don't think anything differently than their group, but they have the kala, like the shared consciousness or shared thoughts thing, where they're able to think about all that stuff. They can do that. They can conceptualize all their shit, right? So they can share their goals and stuff. So my idea is like that's one of the reasons why they were able to attain enlightenment in the first place, is they were able to come to they were able to immediately share thoughts one-to-one. You don't have to translate. You don't have to like interpret what somebody might mean by words. Like you can just basically what I'm doing right now when I'm trying to explain my concept, they would just give you the concept in your head and you would interpret it immediately. There would be no terms. You wouldn't even have to interpret it. You would just have the thought now. Like I just gave you that thought. There you go. That's sort of what I'm getting after here. Yeah, that's actually the plan, Iron Torch. That is the plan. We just have to get a read for it and then get it programmed. But that will be done eventually. Can't permanently kill the Cerebrates, but the Overmind's limited mental powers over distance means that he can't reincarnate them instantly. Right. I also think it's totally fine for the Overmind to just gestate a new Cerebrate, which kind of does make it like kind of pointless for him to reincarnate it. I would just say it's sort of like repairing a unit versus building a new one. It's going to be cheaper to repair it. So that's probably how I would conceptualize it on a technical level. And also, he has to generate the Cerebrate on site, which means that there's a travel distance, a lag time before the brood gets like the reincarnation is like, okay, the brood doesn't have too much time chaos and split up, and then we can just have like the brood return to its previous, business essentially. And then the Cerebrate, if the Cerebrate has to like return on site, it also has to like regenerate its swarm in a sense, like its brood. It's not going to have control over the Zerg that are over there. So you can go after the Cerebrate to disrupt the control over the local brood. And then if you can keep hold of that, which will be difficult because obviously programmed in every Zerg is going to be a directive to defend the Cerebrate that is controlling them. So they are going to follow in on that directive just to try to maintain control of that area very desperately and perhaps in a discoordinated fashion, which is totally fine. But if you're able to hold that line and make sure that the Overmind can't properly reincarnate it and then do away with the corpse, then the Overmind has to generate a new Cerebrate on site, right? And yeah, well, I'm not sure about the experience knowledge thing. Like maybe they could pass through it is just a conduit for the Overmind's commands. I'm not sure if we're going to keep the individualistic aspect of the Cerebrates, because that was, in my mind, the justification for that is something about being individualist and having your own personality and tactics is actually good for the organism of the Zerg long term, and that's why it's there. Whereas obviously Blizzard just wanted characters that could speak. That's why they did it. Like they didn't necessarily put too much thought into the ramifications of the Cerebrates being, different in that respect. And again, it's a fair point because without Cerebrates, what characters do we have? We have to rely on like infested Zerg or infested Terran and Protoss and stuff. So yeah, I'm not sure about your idea, DF. I just feel like with the scale that we're after, it would probably be impossible to eradicate the whole brood. It would be a very big feat, even after the Cerebrate is dead and the brood is like kind of discombobulated. It'd be a pretty big feat just to deal with all of the Ovaleths, Othstaleths, Alazaleths, Iraleths, all of the command structure. That would be pretty difficult to do just by itself, let alone killing every last Zergling or whatever. So I don't really see that as like a possible thing you could even do in the first place. It just seems like such an impossible victory condition or whatever. So at that point, it almost is like, why have one? Cerebrates have different expertise, so some of them are more valuable than others. Yeah, but you ignore this entirely. If you just say that the Overmind is using the Cerebrates as a conduit for its experience and expertise, and then the Overmind is the central nervous system or the neural network or whatever, and that the Cerebrates are just there to relay the signal, right? Like they're relaying the orders. Your later idea about the Cerebrates being the Overmind's different personalities is kind of interesting, but then I'm concerned about the idea that Cerebrates would ever have any conflict or disagreement with one another. I don't really see how that would ever happen if they're just parts of the Overmind's personality. And also, like, what does that make the Overmind when the Overmind gives its directives? Is the Overmind the core personality, and then everybody else is like a side personality or something? Yeah, I don't know. That is a really difficult thing for me to wrap my heads around. My heads, by the way, my head around. Yeah, I'll think more about the Cerebrate thing for sure, but definitely some potential there. So yeah, I gotta bail out. I gotta use the bathroom, and we've been going for almost 4 hours. Had a lot of really good stuff here just in this, and obviously we had some fun stuff earlier. Vote in the polls if you haven't already. Don't change your vote, please. Jesus Christ, and or just keep doing it. I guess it's fun memes. But yeah, that's quite the mess. Yeah, we'll continue on. Maybe unironically, this like putting together this list and stuff, it might influence the poll. It might influence people. It might be like, I want to explore this new Protoss thing that we're doing, or the new Terran thing that we're doing, or the new Zerg thing, or whatever. Like maybe that will influence it. I don't know, but make your voice heard if it's not already. Check out the polls in the community tab, and I will catch you guys later.